Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you are coming in from YouTube and you'd like to join the conversation, you can click on this little button down below and you'll get to Zoom. And then you click on the little button down below and you get to Makana. And that's where you can actually ask questions and vote on those questions and be part of the actual online conversation. Now, if you see all these questions and we're answering them all and we're talking about them and you think that you could be part of that conversation, that we're off our rails every once in a while, which we might be, but you think you could correct that, you could add to the conversation, add your knowledge, then jump on. You just have to be here a little early, 6:40 a.m. Pacific Standard Time before we do our mic checks, and then we'd love to have you. This panel are people who volunteered to share their knowledge with everybody else, and so if you're willing to do that, if you're willing to contribute back to the group, we'd love to have you. Come in early if you'd like to check your kit, so you can come in as early as 6 o'clock and we'll work with you on it. If no one checks their kit, then we just talk about whatever we're talking about. Today we were talking a lot about citrus, but sometimes it's actually very technical. It was a little technical about citrus. There was some talk about mixing plants, but anyway, but otherwise, it's a great time for you to do tech checks and be part of the conversation. At 7 o'clock, we're going to have general conversation about media production, virtual production. So any questions that you have around that, it's a fair place to do it. And literally, it's what USB cable should I, choose to, high-end audio processing. It's a wide range, HLS streaming and process. So you really can ask anything that relates to media production and virtual production. So the best thing to do is to really think about it during the day. One thing that we just noted is that once you've signed into Makana, if you click on what we call the hamburger up in the upper right, there's like a little notepad there. Anytime during the day, you can just say, oh, I got a question, throw it in there. And then you can cut and paste that into Makana each day for the actual show. So you can think about it all day. And that's what we recommend. And then throw it in here and we'll chew through it. If you're not asking a question, make sure to vote on them. That defines our run of show. That tells us what we should talk about next. And if you are interested in sharing this, you are able to. Don't use your own link. Use the one that I'm posting in here. If you use your own link, people will come in as you. If you use the link that I just put in Makana, people will be able to register for themselves. Anyway, let's go ahead and jump into the questions. Bill, go take it away.
Here we go. We start this morning with one from Guy Cochran in Seattle and on the panel. What's something that you've heard on Office Hours that helped influence a future decision?
Nothing. Chris has never bought anything that he's heard of on Office Hours.
No, I'm shaking my head at the decisions that have been made. It's like, yes, thanks,
Go ahead. Go ahead, Leland.
If anything, I learned from Grant how to run a Zoom inside of a Zoom, and that was one of the coolest processes we managed to develop upon for the PHI event, and it really changed up the way that we worked Zoom in an event process.
Yeah, go ahead, Sky.
Pyle microphone, headphone,
Yep.
and MixPre 3. But as far as the being able to believe that I could do something, that's this group. You've allowed me to take on things that are way above my head because you're going to be there with me, and you have been. Yeah. So thank you.
I mean, I think that is really the power of being able to know that you have a group that can kind of back you up. I know that I was talking, I think I talked about this on an earlier show, but I was talking to somebody and I was like, I think it was actually Jake and I were talking about it. I said, if I have to think about something for more than 10 minutes, if I Google for more than 10 minutes, I go, oh, I'll just bring that up in Office Hours tomorrow. Like I'm not gonna actually spend processing time on an idea because there's a whole bunch of people. Why have one person think about it when I could have 150 people think about it? Laura and then Jeffrey.
The education hours have absolutely helped me process through some stuff and absolutely what information I bring forth to my administration.
That's great. Jeffrey and then Bill.
Two things. First of all, the portal hack for Zoom, getting it up to 720. And then second of all, you guys were all talking about at-home kits, and I was thinking to myself, well, I'm never going to have an at-home kit. And then a month ago, somebody said, hey, can you make me an at-home kit?
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. Bill and Chris.
So I spent most of my career in standard video, so I was used to, XLR and BNC cables and the rest of that. When video over IP became such a huge thing and we started getting into the fact that you're doing computers, not doing standard analog equipment, there was a period of a couple of years in there where I thought, man, I've got to retrain myself in so many areas that it was daunting. Office hours made that transition for me to start understanding the IP side of video incredibly easier. And just being here and listening to people talk about networking, those interfaces, the new protocols, understanding that this migration I was already seeing was going to accelerate exponentially and I better get ahead of it was huge.
Chris?
I'm just curious, Alex, what would you call office hours? Is it a club? Is it a think tank? Is it a guild? Is it a cult? What I mean, what is it?
The
What
answer
is it
yes.
to you? Well, how would you describe it in your biography one day?
Well, it depends.
No,
It depends.
no.
No. I think that number one is I don't know how to describe it. Like it is not what I expected. So I didn't come up with going, oh, I'm gonna do this. I expected when I started office hours that it would be me answering everybody's questions. A whole bunch of people get to come in and I'll answer their questions because, I've learned a bunch of things about virtual events and, over 10 years, and I can save everybody a lot of time. And I want the virtual events to be successful because I don't want to go back to physical events. So there was a lot of other reasons for it, but that was one of the things. I want to build, what I learned from Hangouts was that I've said this before, by hanging on to all the how-tos, by keeping it all in my head, I basically depressed the entire industry because we learned all these things. We were doing 3 to 5 a week at really high levels. We knew everything we knew stuff that the engineers didn't know about how Hangouts would react to things. And so the issue is that but by not telling everybody, everyone just kept on having failed Hangouts. So no big companies would use Hangouts because they kept on failing. And so I was like, we got to stop having that be the case. And I'd also gotten past the idea that what you knew mattered. I had for a long time, I thought that, and I've said this recently, but I really had it like what I know or the equipment that I have or the resources that I have or what makes me successful. And I'm completely grounded in the understanding that it's who you know. And, it's just who you know. It's who you know to hire. It's who you know that you've helped. It's who you know that, that the community that you're part of is the number one reason for your success. Always. And your resources may give you access to that. My knowledge attracted people to become part of this larger community, but I am clear that it's who you know. And not in a crass way that people usually say that with, but it is the community that you build around it. And what we've done is we have a community built around us that is people that are willing to share with each other. People are willing to, that want to work with each other. People who are trading information all the time and are generous and are, good-willed, and we've basically created this community, and the structure that we have enforces that or tends to enforce that. And so we have this incredible, I guess what I would say is I just feel like what's happened more than anything else is this incredible community of people who are working together to move forward, and in a way that I don't, and I, again, not what I expected when we started, but something that I very much value.
There's the added benefit of the fact that because we spend so much time together, we understand each other's personality.
Right.
John and I were looking for the perfect person to act as a greeter to an event. And we knew because we'd spent so much time with Sky, he's the guy. Right. And we contacted him and he's like, yeah, I'm available. I could do it. And he just had the absolute perfect personality to welcome in people, make them feel comfortable, move them into the chain, through the various rooms that Leland was talking about.
Well, and I think that I often invite people to be on the panel, and I think it's important for them to understand is that part of being on the panel is letting us get to know you, letting everybody get to know you, and for most people that's a good thing. Some people not, but you know, like, but for most people, it's a good thing, especially if you're going to get up here and be generous and share and, you know, and not be over salesy and just be here and just have a generous conversation. You know, it means that a whole bunch of people get to know who you are, and we get to know who you are. And I think that there's I think that a lot of people have benefited from the fact that, you know, one of us is like to what you're saying. And there's lots of people that I've hired, and a lot of people that have bought stuff from Guy, and a lot of people that have done other things, because we get to know those people, and we want them to be part of our community. You know, and so I think that anyway, we've kind of we'll go real quickly through this, and then we'll go to another question. We've diverted. This is a Sunday. Well, it's not really a Sunday conversation anymore, but anyway, go ahead. Jesse, and then Roscoe, and then Jake, and then Bill, and then we'll move on.
Thanks. Yeah, I feel that this group is a really excellent opportunity for cross training the individual, as in, you know, we're all working. Well, not we're all, many of us are doing this one man, one person show, you know, nowadays. So we get all of the different departments in one place, and also the different scale and level. So it's sort of like cross training for the individual, and also a crossroads between kind of high level broadcast, doing a little basic Zoom meeting, and kind of everything in between. So that's been really helpful for me. Thanks.
And you know, cross training is the new thing, right, with fitness. And it's like, for most of us until then, if you're just an editor, it's like you have a huge one arm that's just massive, and everything else is really small. You know, and so being able to cross train and be able, you know, if you're a camera operator, it's like the other arm is really massive, but everything else is really small. And so being able to kind of even that out and have a whole body fitness is useful. Go ahead, Roscoe, and then Jake.
Yeah, mine breaks into the word Scarhoy. I had no idea what it was. I don't think I'd ever would have Google searched it. And next thing I know, I'm getting it explained to me by 3 Jeffs in a meeting. And I learned so much, and it's so critical to where I'm headed.
Yeah.
That magic little stuff. So that knowledge that other people have that they're just so willing to share of.
Yeah, absolutely. Jake, and then Bill.
Yeah, I'm drinking the office hours Kool-Aid. And I think kind of to piggyback on what you were saying a few minutes ago, Alex, I mean, I've noticed just the simple change in when I'm looking at things that I want to try to do or something that I'm going to need to learn. It's just the difference between the thought being, oh man, how much work is it going to be to figure this out, versus quickly knowing that like there's this amazing resource right here, and it's really empowering, and it changes the way that you think a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Bill.
The words that came to my mind were users group, but not in the old sense, because those were specific to a certain thing. This is like way bigger. You've blown that concept up, made it global, made it across different disciplines, but we are the people who are using this technology and happy to share, as in the old users group mentality. Come, let's gather, let's share what we know, and that will move everyone and the industry forward. And I think that's the best part of that model.
And the only thing I'll say is that we blew it up. Not me. It really is like an incredible amount of effort by an enormous number of people that make this work, you know, and I'm just honored to be part of it. So anyway, so it's I just want to thank everybody that shows up and continues to move this stuff forward. Next question
comes from Ken Richard. No location given. I produce many sporting events where I'm inside the facility. I'm looking for a noise canceling headset and microphone intercom that is reasonably priced. My intercom needs are very simple, so I'm also considering just some basic announcer type headsets. What are the recommendations?
I mean, both. Yeah, go ahead, Leland.
Fifine and Newer are both off brands that have come in recently on the market that have some pretty quality gear available for a low budget. So I would look into both those names on Amazon.
It depends on whether you're looking for a 4-pin/5-pin or whether you're trying to do it off of a cellular. So like if you're doing the Parrot headsets are pretty good. The 450s, the 350s and the 450s are pretty good as Bluetooth for your phone. The best mic for your phone in a loud environment is called The Boom. And I talked about it last week or the week before, but The Boom, they make the headset mics for Apache helicopters. so they, and so that is, I mean, I used to have one that I used when I had a convertible. I could have the top down. People thought I was in the office. So it's really, really powerful when it comes to a cellular. It'll give you an earpiece and a headset, but it's like $300, $350, something like that. Otherwise, you're probably going to more traditional headset mics. It just depends on whether, again, are you interfacing? Are you trying to do this with a consumer device, or are you plugging a 4-pin or a 5-pin into a comms device, and that'll change kind of your calculus there. Clearcom makes headsets that are pretty good, single muff and double muff that work well. Next question.
Actually comes from me, and I wrote, I have to capture a meeting in Teams next week, and I do. Currently, it doesn't seem like Teams supports a 2-up slides and presenter view that I can capture. The web says that it's coming in March. That doesn't help me now. What's the best way to scrape just the presenter shot in a Teams meeting without pushing the task off onto the presenters to send me something, because that's not going to work.
And it's just their video, or it's not
I
their
want to
still?
capture their presence, because I've got the slides afterwards, and I can cut the show. I just need a screen.
Are you able to
scrape that works.
spotlight in Teams? Yep. Go ahead, Chris. Chris will know
So
about this.
we do a lot of stuff for Microsoft, and guess what? They want to use Teams. So
That's exactly what I
was like,
ran into.
the perfect person to ask is Chris.
what you're going to get, Bill, is you get a tray across the bottom with everybody. Most people want to turn their cameras off because they want their cameras off. You can pin, each person has a little 3 dots in the lower left-hand corner. Click on that. You can pin them. And then there's another checkbox, and I believe it said, or a thing underneath pin that says, I think, fit to frame, which will basically force their box into a 16:9 framing. So you can pin multiple people side by side, and you can, on a high res screen, you can get greater than 1080 out of 2 people. It's as good as it's going to be. There's not a lot you can do to get it better, and sometimes it absolutely bags you. I will tell you, we were doing a meeting a couple days ago where my feed of one person was aces. It looked great. It was probably 1080. It really looked good. But the primary recordist in another location, she kept telling me, she goes, he looks totally out of focus, low res, what's going on? I go, I don't know, he looks great here.
Mm-hmm.
So I would recommend, if you have the resources, have a secondary person doing a screen scrape at a second location. It may help you.
Thank you. That really helps.
Mickey.
I also wondered if you can get, I'd like a little reference clip of their slides. I'd like them pretty big, but I'd love to have a reference slide, so when I cut in the slides, I can know where they changed them. Is that doable in that 2-up?
I don't have a definite on you.
Okay.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Is
and then
Teams
John.
not capable of outputting NDI like Skype is?
You read my
Is it-
mind,
is it-
Nikki.
It
Read my
is.
mind.
That's where I was going. Yes, it has full. I'll leave a link to the way to actually turn that on over on Teams. You have to do that on the back end. So there's a link in Mercana.
Our
that's
problem,
the
and
though.
the
It's a
reason
corporate that's running the Teams. I don't have any access to their settings.
That's
the
our
host.
problem too. We've never even approached it because the meetings that we are asked to join and record are controlled by Microsoft. We have zero contact with their IT. That's the
It's
problem. with
literally
Teams
one
NDI.
line of code. It's literally
Understood.
one command line.
They won't
that's
even let
turned.
me talk to that person, Leland.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't
It's
get
a
the IT
network.
in the Fortune 100 company to talk them into doing anything.
It's definitely a security issue when it comes to an NDI broadcast link or port being opened. There's no doubt about it.
Yep. Next question.
Moving on, we're at Tyler Roberts of Chambersburg, and Tyler says, pros and cons of Vimeo Enterprise accounts for live streaming. Our church has an opportunity to get the Vimeo Enterprise through a faith-based plan.
It's a really strong solution. Like Vimeo is a great. Go ahead, Jesse.
Yeah, I use Vimeo quite a bit. For church, it would be easy to just set up a reoccurring stream where you stream to a destination. It creates a video after you hit end event. I would say, with one of the organizations I work with, we do live captioning and we send it out to Facebook. That's been a little bit quirky as far as how that's arriving. So I check your captioning pipeline, but the customization of the video player is very flexible. So it's been working pretty great. And it's basically, it was live stream and Vimeo were one and the same for quite a while, and they've recently kind of ditched live stream, and Vimeo is the way to go.
Yeah, the thing, Vimeo, when they first bought Livestream, I didn't totally get it, but they've really done really well at that integration, and everything from a clear listed, I can put this on my website without it clicking through to YouTube or clicking through to something else. I can have that there. I can control what's in the player. To the ability to scale. If you want your church, for instance, to have an OTT solution that people could just open up the church's app in Apple TV or in their, all those things. You can do that. It costs money to have them do it, but it's a fraction of what it would cost to do it yourself. And so you can have OTT stuff where there's subscriptions, there are VOD, there's live mixed with VOD, all those things in every major player. Vimeo has a solution for that. So the enterprise version is just the first step, and the fact that you can keep on scaling. I think that they've done that better for organizations than anyone else as far as that goes. The downside is really just that the infrastructure for the live is not amazing. As a person who does live, like the redundancy internally, and it can be a little quirky internally. It's not the best solution there, and they haven't really upgraded it since they bought Livestream, and Livestream was never great at that, and it costs money. That's why a lot of people are using free solutions. But other than that, I think that they're just crushing it. As far as moving forward. Next question.
Moving on comes from Chris Fenwick here in the panel. And Chris asks, during the scope conversation, that was yesterday's second hour, which was fascinating, someone mentioned the digital color meter on the Mac, and I heard some negative comments. Is it not accurate? Is it irrelevant? Discuss amongst yourselves.
Go ahead, Charles.
Yeah, so for professional work, I would not trust it. It's just going to tell you the reading on the particular screen that you're on. And that's it.
The
It's
color
not telling
meter.
you.
Right. Yeah.
It's not telling you the value of the signal
Right.
that you are sending out. And depending on the screen that you're on, because of the ICC color on Macs, you get a shift between one Mac and another Mac, or another screen and this screen. So it'll shift. So to be absolutely certain, I wouldn't trust it. To get a quick reference, it might not be bad, but.
So if I change my color profile and I've messed up my monitor, it's just going to show me, yep, your monitor's messed up. Yep. Interesting. Okay, good to know. Thanks.
What's really missing, and there is software to do this, but I'm kind of surprised there isn't a Mac software to do this. There is high-end tools that will do packet inspection, so you can stream to them. Sony makes one. A couple other folks make them. You can stream, and they can watch the stream, and they will actually give you the pixel values and a lot of other data about that stream. And it's actually the data coming in, not the displayed colors and so on and so forth. So they'll give you frame rate and data and packets and segment size and all these other things that are there. They can see all that there, but they're like, again, turns out to be like $8,000 for the software to do that right now. Chris.
So what's interesting is if I know exactly what a color value is supposed to be, maybe the digital color meter is better at me checking my monitor than to checking my work.
Well, yeah, and it'll be more accurate also if you calibrate your monitor. So if you use something like a spider or something like that, you're gonna be able to calibrate it. Next question.
Moving on to James in Dublin, Ireland, who says, how did Clubhouse go last night? What was good and what was bad? And he says, despite my best attempts, I was asleep at 3 a.m. Come on, James, what's important to you? Office hours or sleep?
Your priorities are way out of whack. Yeah, I thought it was fun. I thought we had a good time. It was. I don't think that it would have been nearly as good without Mukana. we kind of hacked it pretty quickly. Like I was like, and we'll do this, and about a half an hour before I lost my nerve. I was afraid too many people would show up and it would be just chaos. I'm not very good at chaos, and so I quickly put up a bit.ly link that let people just jump into Mukana and ask questions. And because of that, we had just it was this. Now the other thing that I got though is that there were a handful of people. Now generally also I only brought people in that I knew. So people from this group, we had one person I think that I accidentally brought in, and he was problematic, not because he did anything bad, just that his internet connection was really bad. But outside of that, I just picked panelists or people that we were known to the community, so I didn't have to worry about trolling. There was one person that had their hand up for a long time, and I was like, I don't know that person. And it was a weird name and a weird picture. So that gets into the whole, a weird name, weird picture, and not known. I was like, not going to go down that path, and so anyway, so I think that overall, I think it was an interesting conversation. I do find it very hard when you can't cue anybody. Like, it just seems like I can now understand why other people would have a lot of difficulty doing calls that are smooth, because there's no real communication. Go ahead, Mickey, and then Chris.
Yeah,
It's like smoke signals.
I caught the tail end of it, and it felt to me a lot like the listening to the Makana stream when I'm not around, except for oh no, go ahead, no, go ahead, please, no.
Yeah, exactly. I think because it seemed like most people were pretty happy at just listening. So that's what I really was curious about. Like, how many people in the audience really want to raise their hand, or they just want to listen? And because it seemed like a large number of people were already really fine with listening, I really felt like there's no reason that we couldn't just pipe this show into Clubhouse and have people just listen to it there. Go ahead, Chris.
I'd be very curious to see how long they let you do that. I think they would squash that, because it's sort of not
only
what
if it got really,
they want.
I guess what I would say is that only if it got really big in Clubhouse. Like, if
Understood.
if there were like 5,000 people listening to office hours, and I don't think that'll ever happen, because I think that if we're only, I think that people would quickly realize that they want to be part of something else.
And I think that what would work best, probably because of the tight nature, is if the Clubhouse, I guess we'd call them panelists, was a smaller, handpicked, we're going to discuss this tonight, as opposed to a more generalist discussion with 20 people in it.
Yeah, no, I think that having a conversation, like, some kind of theory conversation, or something that we do like a second hour type thing, and then having that conversation with 4 or 5 people. But it gets back into, do I really want to do that? Like, the other problem that we have is we have a bunch of people here that use Android and use other things and don't, and so cutting a bunch of people out. So it feels more like I'd still rather have those 5, but here in Zoom, and then just pipe it into Clubhouse. I haven't quite figured out why. I mean, we're going to test it next week. So all next week, we're going to pipe. I got to get a couple pieces assuming they all show up on time. What I'm getting is I have a lightning to headset, but I can't find it. That's the problem. I have a whole bunch of them, and now I can't find any of them. And I just haven't used them for so long. So lightning to 1/8" jack, and then an 1/8" jack splitter that does TRRS to 1/4" TRS and XLR. And I'm going to put those in, and then I'm just going to pipe an output, straight into Clubhouse. And I think that I'll be curious to see whether, what people do with it. It's funny, you can't get any feed as to whether they like it or not, other than them showing up or not, because there's no way for them to do comments. Like, it's just to me, it seems very odd. Next question.
It's the ultimate social media numbers game. Like, you see a high number and you think you're doing good.
It's next question.
Talak Lopez Waterman from New York says, when I teach my course at Old Dominion University, I have to sign in through the Blackboard app to start the class or Zoom meeting. It's on another account. Yesterday, I found it changed my picture and name for all of my meetings to my own account. How do I prevent this madness?
Does anyone know enough about Blackboard to answer that question? Yeah, go ahead, Roscoe.
Well, I mean, you run into this because if you went to a personal meeting with your personal account, that Zoom will just be there and hold on to that. I have my college account, and I have my personal account, and that's partly Zoom just likes to, whatever it did last, that's where it likes to go again. So I'm not so sure Blackboard did it as much as he probably may have signed in on his personal account to some other meeting. And then when he went to go to his class, Zoom said, this is the credentials I have, I'm going to use them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know that when I have to jump from one, I have like 10 Zoom accounts. And I know that if I jump to one, I have to go out, log into the other one, make sure that it's logged into Chrome, make sure everything else is off. Then I'll click on somebody's link, and it'll take me in using that account. It'll move me into that process. By the way, having lots of accounts on Zoom is much easier with LastPass, or 1Password, because I just have a list of like, how am I going to log in? Oh, I'm going to log in with this one. Go ahead, Bill, and then Leland.
Well, I was just going to say, if you really want a bunch of experts on Blackboard, I think a lot of the folks in our education discussion on Saturday morning.
An EDU question. Yep, absolutely. Leland, real quick.
just as a pointer, a lot of people tend to save their passwords, like you just mentioned, when Chrome pops up that password dialog. If you go to log into Zoom, you'll see the default that comes up, which, as Roscoe mentioned, was the last login. If you click on that box where your email is, all other logins that you have for Zoom will show up in a drop down. You can simply go up and down with your mouse to find the right one.
And I don't ever let Chrome have my information. I keep it all in LastPass, because then I can go any platform. I don't want it to end up in Chrome, because then it's a hole for me. You know, I don't even like doing it in apps. I hate, you know, logging into apps, because that means it's hard for me to get that password back out into LastPass. So next question.
It has to do with registration stuff. It comes from Sirakanthas in Chennai, India, and he or she says, is there any service which provides live streaming to private audiences, not the same email domains, if the registration for the attendees has already happened in a different registration platform?
So Zoom will do it. I mean, if you want to do a Zoom event with a pre-registration, what you have to do is you set up a Zoom webinar, and then you can, I think you can do this also with meetings, and then you can import a CSV file. So you can basically say, now they're going to get one more email from you when you do that, but they're going to, they don't have to re-register to do that. So you can register them, you know, 1,000 people or 2,000 people in Zoom. You can, I believe, do the same thing with something like Livestream or Vimeo, you know, where you can take those registrations and pre-populate the access to it. So I think those are the two. Those are the only two services I can think of off the top of my head. I mean, you can technically do it with YouTube private streaming, but it's limited to the number of people that can actually do that. You can send them all emails and have them all have access to a private stream. It's really cumbersome. I would do it that way. And then of course you can build a web. What we do is we build you a web page that goes into our player, or takes an Akamai player. But so there's lots of ways of doing it. The easiest way would be Zoom. The second easiest would be Vimeo. Third easiest would be some kind of custom version of it that's grabbing onto it that I can think of. Next question.
Philip Oler of Katona, New York says, is there a way to configure NDI to connect to a different subnet? At work, each floor has its own subnet, and I'd like to be able to send a signal from one floor to another. Thanks.
Go ahead, Leland.
I'm not the IT guy, but I would think a submask should be something you could construct a 255.255 and filter out that third IP address. I'm not the guy to ask that question, but I think that's where you're headed with that.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I believe this is something you might have to set up within your switch and or router system, where you can do port forwarding between subnets.
Yep. Yeah,
and or VLANs as well.
Yep. It'll be a little tricky. Next question.
Brian Stockton of Des Moines, Iowa. Leland mentioned the Zoom inside a Zoom. Can you expand on what that is?
Go ahead, Leland.
I will. Could you give me screen share? I have a couple of diagrams I can show people real quick. Alex, if you can, or Mickey, if you can give me the screen share. This will make it a little easier. Okay. When we did the PHI event, or the Public Health Institute, we had a dilemma. We had plenaries, recorded demonstrations, we had 4 breakout sessions, we had TED Talks, etc. So the way that we worked that was I built a flow chart that allowed us to create a green room in one Zoom and 2 stages. And what that allowed us to do is have the presenters enter the Zoom link into the lobby of the first Zoom. And then that allowed us, if they needed to have mic checks or video checks, we would push them into a green room breakout so that they could go and get checked with an individual. If and when they were ready, they would go to the stage breakout, which was stage 1 or stage 2, depending on which event was coming up next and who was there and ready to run. After that, we would push those people from the stages into breakout rooms that were set up later in the day. So we needed to literally leave that meeting and go to a third meeting for the breakouts. So all of that control had to take place. But the beauty of the Zoom inside a Zoom is the fact that you have all of the presenters inside of one location. So basically we had the plenary panel stage, the keynote stage, the green room, and a room for TED Talks if we needed them. So if we had separate TDs that wanted to run each of these separate broadcasts individually, we could from around the world. And then we designated people like Sky. In the green room, we put myself and Doug into the plenary or TD stages. And then I managed the keynote stage and Doug managed the TED Talk stage. And in that, we had all of our backups ready to go. But the beauty of it is broadcasting everything from the one Zoom by capturing either an NDI or as WebRTC, bring that video feed into another machine via a capture card, and broadcast that stream out from a separate machine into another Zoom so that all of the presenters were in one location. They weren't affected by the attendees at all, and we had full control over the attendees in another meeting. And if something failed, there was simply another TD inside that second Zoom that could take over the broadcast immediately. So it was a convenience not only technically, but in essence, really proficient in the end. So it helped us produce the event.
That was a great answer. Yeah, well done. All right. All right. All right. Next question. Next question.
Just quick, but he did modify that after he did it, and I would love to have him just what did he learn and how did he modify it?
Well, what we learned, Sky, and it was all about the first day's presentation. It was very difficult for us to move people from the secondary webinar as attendees into the meeting breakouts for all these breakout sessions. Everybody was lost at first. Nobody knew where they were supposed to go. So we ended up building links on a web page that people could simply push a button and find where the next meeting was. But it meant having people like Sky, Tara from PHI, who did a wonderful job as a hostess on that entire process for the full 2 days. It was really having somebody help organize the individuals and tell them where they needed to go. We had banners on video, giving people an idea where they should head to the breakout stage with links on the screen so they could find themselves and know where to go. But it definitely made a change when we saw that everybody got confused right away as to where they should be. So definitely have a location where everyone can go, whether it's an email or a web page with buttons to those meeting links. So it's an easy click through for people to get there.
I've been really thinking about the concept of having some way to have a whole bunch of rooms that are constantly like Zoom rooms or even just instances that join all the breakouts that give me two things. One is the ability to hear all the breakouts, like just be able to literally on a console, just move up and down. I want to hear this breakout, that breakout. I want to hear all of them a little bit. I want to do whatever. And a PA system. So it's like just push a button and just talk to everybody all at one time.
We managed to pull some of that off with virtual machines where we had Philippe running 4 virtuals on one machine and he could just jump into the breakouts and see what was going on. So that worked.
But the idea is that this is where I think that, we could figure it out, but it's not going from one room to the next. It's all of the rooms being in a piece of hardware that I can listen to mixed together. And this is where I kind of feel like the little $200 or $300 Courtney machines that we call would be a stack of those, just kind of figuring out a way to automate them all, just joining what they need to do. Go ahead, Chris.
That would certainly be the Alex hardware solution. The in-the-box solution is what Leland mentioned. So Felipe could actually do that. He had multiple virtual. Actually,
how's he mixing the audio?
Yeah, he through some sort of software thing. He can, like I've mentioned it before, sound control, where you can turn up the volume per app that's running. And so you could do it in the box, but you could also do it in a hardware solution like what you're talking about.
I'd have to see it.
Tucker mentioned in chat and does it with Unity as well. He just combines the Unity with the Zoom on the cloud and creates his own little interface.
And again, Tucker was the glue again that held up the communications together.
Call Tucker.
Yep, call Tucker. Next question.
Moving on to Ed Rubin's question from Oakland, California. Any recommendations for a 65-inch OLED screen to use for color-critical work with a wide angle of view to match a 2019 iMac? The LG CX seems like a contender. Any comments or suggestions?
Charles?
So you said critical. So I'm going to go with that first. I would get exactly what I have, which is a Flanders Scientific XM.
Oh, we lost you. We can't hear you now. It must be audio follows video, I think.
No, he has his mic muted. Zoom mute.
Mic's muted. Oh,
the Zoom mute got knocked off.
Okay, there we go.
Phone
I apologize. Anyway,
okay, you said Flanders Scientific.
Yeah, I would go with the XM 651U. I have the 55-inch because those were available right now. The 65, it'll take about 2 weeks to deliver. For critical work, that's what I would go. If you do choose to go with an LG, you will have to calibrate it immediately out of the box, it's a bit of a hot mess, but it can be done.
I will say I have an LG, and we need to bring somebody in to look at it. I mean, I get as close as I can get, but it's just really, and you really want to get the Blackmagic interface for it so that you can use hardware calibration, in my opinion.
Right, exactly. If you can, and this you can do now, and you don't want to get a Flanders, check out the Panasonics that you can now get in the US. Those are great monitors. They're handpicked. They're calibrated at the factory. Those have been used in a lot of studios that I've been in. It's spoken by company 3, like the big names. They tend to have one of those in the room, and we can get those in the US now, which just a few months ago we could not. I'm actually thinking about getting one myself just to have in the house.
Could you put the model numbers? Because just to say Panasonic is a big bucket, so need a little more specific, please. Thank you.
Mickey.
I nominate that we have another unit of currency called the Charles.
Yes.
And that's
You just
11
looked at the
grand.
prices of a
$11,000.
Flanders that
Okay,
big. Yeah.
so $11,000 is a Charles, $3,200 is a Mickey. Eventually, we're gonna have to get little dollars that have like the different people's heads on them. I'm a mere $700. And what is it? A Colin is like
Is $7.
$7.
Yeah.
This is getting pricey.
All right. A Charles. How many Charleses are there? Is it? All right. That's excellent. All right. Next question.
3 Scotias.
Gavin Gratian in Manchester, UK says we run small crews, typically no more than 2 camera ops and a switcher op. Currently use poverty comms, PMR radios, and headsets. Is the Unity base clear with very little latency using old phones? I've not tried various push-to-talk apps that have been hard work and laggy in operation.
I think that actually the push-to-talk, Bluetooth push-to-talk is the #1 problem with consumer-based comms. And I looked into it. It turned out to be much more complicated than I thought. What we really want is a physical latch, that goes into the phone that is, I can push to talk and it actually opens up my mic and then lets it go. You're always going to have some lag with the Bluetooth ones. They're not perfect. When you're used to physical push to talk, the Bluetooth ones are laggy. If you're only used to Bluetooth, they're great. And so you're always going to have this kind of little bit of a lag, with that. And I don't, that Unity is better than most, and it's got some great integration. If you buy the push to talks that come from the Unity webpage, they work better because they've been tested more with Unity, but they're never going to be as good as physical, in my opinion. Chris?
I know the question was about phones, but I just got to say, yesterday I spent some time with TJ and we were setting up Unity with the Mac client and using the Stream Deck, and I love it. Unity with the, individual channels, IFB, you could set it up as an IFB, whatever, with the Stream Deck is just awesome. And the best feature is when you start up the day, and I look at my page of people that I need to talk to today, as they log on, boop, 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 all the buttons change color. And I can glance and say, the crew is here, ready to go in one glance.
Yeah, it's pretty great. Go ahead, Leland. I can't hear you, Leland.
I double clicked my mouse there.
Yep.
I clicked it twice. I would look into Motorola's newest solution. They're taking PTT a bit further. It's called Wave PTX. I'm just now digging into this recently. It's their new solution for push-to-talk over IP from what I'm seeing. So I haven't opened the box. When I do, I'll see what it's all about and maybe bring some more response to that.
The other thing to think about is one thing that we've been doing a lot of recently is the integration of hardware boxes with Unity. So tying in Unity with Studio Technologies Dante solutions. We're doing more and more of that. The Studio Technologies does not scale their own system much past 6 boxes headsets, in my opinion, but I'm working with Tucker to make it bigger. All right, next question.
Our friend Laura Seal from Greensboro, North Carolina asks, why are gaming laptops like those from MSI and Alienware so much cheaper than Razer with the same components? Is it build quality, longevity, or something else?
The build quality, I will say the build quality with the Razers is very high. There's a lot of little things that they're doing that I don't know if it's always necessary, but it definitely feels better to use, and it feels more solid when you're buying it. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I would say like one thing is that Razer, I think, doesn't push nearly as much volume as Alienware. Alienware equals Dell. And so they can't bring the price that much lower. And also, I think Razer is trying to aim for the a little more premium market, similar to Apple. And yeah, they have these like, oh, it's ultra thin. It's like, nice enclosures, similar to what Apple is doing, and they charge for that.
I feel like Razer is the most client facing PC, laptop that, or even other things we get, the most client facing one. Alienware feels like a game, more aimed at gamers, and MSI is more game towards back of house. When it comes to those. And I have a home built one right here. I have an MSI in my downstairs office. I will say I don't buy Razers right now because the last one went to sleep and never woke up. And it was evidently a thing. And I don't have a lot of PCs that are laptops. It's just not how I use them. But I think that's kind of how I think of it. And a lot of it has to do with just basic build quality and how it looks and, everything else. I will say that oftentimes you have to look at feature set is not the same components does not mean it's the same computer. The quality of how it's put together, how those components are integrated, everything else makes a difference. Just because they hold the same things doesn't mean that they do the same things. Go ahead, Leland.
NVIDIA just announced they released some new Series 3080 laptops. I'm going to leave the link for NVIDIA's.
We're going to have to speed up for everybody because we're going to run out of time. So go ahead, Mickey, real quick.
Yeah, just really quick. I think Leland is unmuted, but yeah, the how the Intel MacBooks throttled a lot. That similar things happen to the ultra thin Razers because it doesn't have nearly as much cooling power for the GPU and CPU.
Yep. Next question.
Patrick Schoenig, Little Rock, Arkansas. Lately, I've noticed when uploading videos from edits to Facebook, the contrast gets crushed. I lose a lot of low and high detail. I'm using a video limiter and seem to be inside the Rec 709 specs per the scope. I've tried the RGB levels trick instead of limiter and get the same results. Where should I look next?
So one thing I would look at is whether you're pre-compressing. Are you uploading high-res files or are you pre-compressing it? I would recommend pre-compressing. So like, for instance, I can upload stuff like it's ProRes to YouTube, but I don't. The reason is because YouTube will give me a generalized solution against the high-res, whereas if I pre-compress it to H.264, the color will look a lot closer to what I uploaded than what because it's not making as many calculations. Next question.
Next question from L. Armstrong in Denver. Advice on selecting pan tilt zoom cameras for live stream of church services.
It's really a price thing. Go ahead, Roscoe.
Yeah, exactly. It depends on your lighting situation too, because obviously the bigger sensors, and this I learned this all from Alex and Jeff Keithley and all people here. Bigger sensors obviously better for low light, and then it really becomes a structure. Panasonic and Sony's are the professional ones that really pan and tilt well and make really good images.
Yeah, I mean, there's PTZ optics on kind of a smaller scale, and those are relatively inexpensive. Then you're going to go up to Panasonic. In my opinion, this is controversial, but in my opinion, you go up to Panasonic, then you go up to Sony. The Sony BRC 1000s are the best, in my opinion, the best all-in-one cameras that you can buy. It's a 1-inch sensor that goes 4K, and they're incredible. 20x zoom. It's really, really great. From there, depending on the budget, I mean, I've learned not to assume budgets for churches. You can start doing broadcast cameras on telemetrics heads. So the telemetrics makes basically remote control heads that will wire into the lenses, and that's where you really take it to a whole different level. But those are probably, you're now budgeting like $20,000-$30,000 a head. So you just have to know that but you start at $2,000 or $3,000 a head, and you get to $20,000 or $30,000 a head. We're going to keep moving because we're running out of time. Next question. Jason
Fitzgerald, New York City, says, I got a batch of Pyle headsets, the 3.5 millimeter TSs, and the Techrise USB audio interfaces. They only pass audio if the plug is inserted halfway. Inserting it to the final click is physically possible, but doesn't pass audio. Do I need a different USB device? Which one?
I think it's the tip sleeve. It shouldn't be. That should be the TRS. Have that problem, not the TS. So you're talking about having a TS. What you want to do is you want to try converting. Yeah. So you got a TS there. So that's a TS into a Sabrent. Usually what happens is if you have a TRS that you put into a TS, you end up with this thing where you can't push it all the way in. But typically that's a mismatch of whatever reason between a TRS. So what you want to do is get a conversion from the TRS. If you have TS, then get it from TS female to TRS male, or the other way around. So just look at it. And if it's tip sleeve, that's TS, then you need to convert it to the other one. If that whole like partially pushing it in is always a TS versus almost always a TRS, a TS versus TRS, or a TS versus TRRS, but it's all of those. Let's Mickey real quick and then we'll move on.
Yeah, does the Techrise have 3 connectors on it? Like one headphone, one headset, and one microphone?
I've seen that form for gaming that has 3.
Yeah,
and I've seen some that have 2.
If you plug into the headset one, the one in the middle, it might work. It might not work the way you want it to. So make sure you're plugging the microphone into the microphone input.
Right. Next question.
Moving on, Chris Waller of Widener, of Lafayette, Indiana, says, would an iPad Pro connected to a P4 work for bringing in a show to Clubhouse?
We're going to find out.
A P4.
I don't know what a P4 is, but
yeah,
using either an iPad or an
Pentium
iPhone. Sorry,
that's a Pentium 4. That's old school.
I don't know why you do that. So anyway, I think a P4 must mean something else because I don't know why you would do a Pentium 4. Anyway, so but I think that we're going to experiment with it of how to get in and out. So we'll know more in the next couple of days because I'm ordering stuff today and hopefully getting it tomorrow or Saturday. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
I think P4 is Zoom, isn't it?
I don't know why it would be Zoom.
Yeah, he just put it in Mechanic. Zoom P4.
Zoom P4. Yeah. What does P4 mean? I don't understand what P4 means in
It's
Zoom.
It's just a Zoom product.
Remote recorder.
Oh, got it. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, we'll take a look. Next question.
Tony Mobley of Newman, Georgia. Our friend, will you explain what scrapes are? I think I know, but I'm not absolutely sure.
So a true video out would push a clean video. Like I'm taking this video and pushing it out of a board. That might be a Blackmagic or AJA board that you have that is going to push a clean signal from your application. Screen scrape is saying there's no official way to get this video out, so I'm literally going to capture the screen. Now that might be the HDMI out that should have gone to your monitor. You put it into something that can record, and that's a screen scrape. And so you're recording the screen, and it comes with the upside that you can get anything. The downside is that if you have notifications or other pop-ups or other things, they show up on that too, because it's not really a video output, official video output. It's a screen
or
scrape.
the mouse.
Chris, I had a mouse.
I've had to paint a few mice out.
I had to track a mouse out of a show that Chris was involved in, and we had to clone out a mouse that I had left in the screen for every person.
Can I just say though? Hold on, I just want
to say it was really good though.
Can I just say, Alex?
We've all done it.
We were you and I were working on that, and I said that looks great, and you turned. I feel like we were in the same room, but I don't think we were. But you kind of snapped at me. And I won't say the client name, you can if you want, but you said, it has to be perfect. I'm like, okay,
yeah,
let's make it better.
Yeah,
it was really good, Alex. It was.
But you got to admit, it was better when I finished it. When I finished it, it was better.
It was better. And I won't say the client name.
Yeah, Mickey.
But yeah, just going back to Tony's question, you've actually been doing this, Tony, like when you take your computer output, HDMI output, and feed it into your ATEM, and you show that to us sometimes in the pre-show.
Yep, absolutely. Next question.
Andy Seal of Oldbury, UK says, I've used Final Cut for years. I'm starting to use Resolve now as I like the efficiency of BRAW files. I can't see a way to add lower thirds in Resolve, so I export ProRes to Final Cut and add the lower thirds there. Am I missing something? And he also notes, I'm shooting in 4K and exporting to 1080p, and he uses Samsung to do it.
Go ahead, John.
Yeah, so you can use Fusion that's built into to resolve. Yeah. So that's
Fusion is-
exactly what it's designed to do, is do graphics and compositing.
Well, it's really not, it's not designed to do graphics, but they've made it great at it. So it's designed to do compositing, like high-end compositing. Fusion was basically a competitor to Nuke before they basically kind of lost the race, and then and then Blackmagic picked them up on a fire sale. And but it's an incredible app, and it was used in a lot of high-end tools for that. And Blackmagic has put it into it. And first they just put in Fusion so you could do composites, green screen composites and roto and that type of thing. Fusion had the 3D engine, so you could do that. And now Blackmagic added a bunch of stuff for graphics, to John's point. It's not as simple as using something like Final Cut or Motion, but wow, is it powerful. Like it is crazy scalable. So it's something that once we get it after the Resolve training, we'll get more into that. Next question.
And actually, it's a continuation of Andy's, because he says, I'm shooting in 4K and exporting to 1080p. I use Samsung T5 drives on the Blackmagic 4K camera and don't want to consume space on the hard drive on my MacBook Pro's native drive. I like that Final Cut lets you import without transferring the files to your local disk, leaving them in place. Does Resolve let you do the same thing?
Go ahead, Mickey, and then Roscoe.
Yeah, if you have to do really fast turnarounds, then yes, I would do that. Just cut off the media drive that came from the camera. But for more traditional workflows, you'd want to offload that to redundant storage, like have a primary work drive and then several copies after that.
Yeah, go ahead, Roscoe.
I agree with everything Mickey said, and the answer is yes. It does. Yes, you can.
Yeah. Go ahead, Charles.
Yeah, it does. I'll agree with everybody. And just have an external that's really fast, NVMe, it's going to be just as fast as your internal.
Yeah, Chris.
We like NVMe, don't we? I will also say that in most apps, certainly in Final Cut, one of the things that you can do, Mickey, and I've done this, where I've initiated a copy from the camera media, the T5 drive, to my RAID, but then I've actually pointed Final Cut to the camera thing and started working when it was a time crunch. And then when the copy is done, I quit Final Cut, detach the drive, and repoint my pointers to the RAID.
Right. Yep.
Valid.
But you can absolutely do it in a fast turn. I've even with Resolve plugged in, 4 or 5 little T5s that are all the cameras, and you just link them all up and cut the show. But it's a bad idea. Like, I'm just letting you know, it just opens you up to like just unhappiness. The good news is that Resolve is pretty good at finding stuff. So if you go back and put it all onto a drive, you can just say, just go look in this folder for those drives. And as long as they're the same files, it'll just go find them. So if you fix your insanity, that you should never do that, you can get it all back on. And I would highly recommend NVMe, like little RAIDs. So anyway, next question.
And our final one from non-second hour, Alex Olegnowitz of Toronto's in with, did anyone watch the Red5Pro XDN launch? They had a lovely Mukana-like interface with an awful streaming experience.
I did not. Did anyone else look at it? Anyone watch it? I don't even know what that was.
You didn't catch Red 5, John? I figured you would. John Preto, it has his hand up.
Oh, go ahead, John. I'm sorry. I was on a webpage trying to figure out what Red 5.
Oh, I didn't see the Red 5 is the streaming server. It started off as open source and free. It was a reverse engineered Flash Media services.
Mm-hmm.
So they came out with that when Flash Media was charging $5,000. Red 5 reverse engineered that server and gave it away for free. And so these are the remnants of that group. One of my programmers that used to work for me at Hello Network is the main server developer over there. So they're doing RSTMP, they do RTMP mostly solutions, and now they have a WebRTC product as well. But I did not see the show.
Evidently,
Yeah,
they
they
didn't
just-
quite get the streaming part to work well. Leland?
Well, they just bought Jitsi. If you're familiar with the Jitsi platform, which is very similar to Zoom, it's now called 8x8, 8x8. So it is a very similar WebRTC interface like we have here on Zoom, but it's been around and been built by several different vendors, and now they've
I
taken
thought Jitsi
the
was
role
open
on.
source.
It was, and then it's still the vendors. It's kind of like what Facebook did with Vidpresso. They bought out the company but left the main company intact, so they had the liberty to do what they wanted with their products. But they're basically running the show with all the finance.
Got it. All right, let's shift gears. We started talking about this last week. The conversation started coming up about building studios, and I've had to build a lot of them in the last decade. Of different sizes, everything from a little home studio to relatively large. I mean, not massive studios. I think the top end ones that we built are about $500,000 a copy. But so they're not like big studios. But I felt like it was probably worth a conversation where we all kind of just trade notes about what it takes to build them. So it's not so much we can talk a little about the control room, but it's also, what do you build into a studio? And I think that one of the things that's important about this conversation is, how do we build studios? And we've thought about this a lot for the next generation of content. I think it's easy to build studios that are just broadcast studios, but I don't think that is the future. I think that what I would call dumb broadcast is, which is no interactivity, it's a shrinking island. Like it's the poles are melting quickly, and it's at sea level, and the poles being interactivity, people are going to expect to be able to be part of the conversation. I think that's what you see with Clubhouse. I think that's what you're seeing with a lot of the Zoom and a lot of what we do, is that there's going to be a pretty strong pull towards interactive content. And I think that it's going to be harder and harder to do content that doesn't have that unless you spend a lot of money. So if you're an Apple or a Netflix creating really high quality content, you've got a play. But this in-between content that we're just broadcasting, but there's no inactivity and not a lot of money in it. I don't think there's any business there. I think that business will slowly fade away. And so I think that you have to figure out ways to tie people in. So when we talk about the studios, that's just my opinion of where we're kind of going with a lot of those things. So how do you build that? And there's the basics of getting good audio and video and everything else, but it's also how do you integrate the online audience and other studios and other people. So anyway, that's kind of the thought process. I think that we just jump right into questions first, and then we'll just keep talking, using it as we've got enough of them starting to stack up that we won't waste any time with preamble. Usually the preamble, by the way, if you're watching second hours, is giving you enough time to get enough questions in. Like if you get the questions into the second hour, we jump into the questions a lot fast. You'll notice that my preamble, like when I'm interviewing someone who we brought on for the second hour, if it lasts 15 minutes, it means I don't think we have enough questions to launch into them. So I'm kind of like waiting for the cycle to warm up. But if we've got 6 or 7 questions, I feel like we just jump into it. So let's go ahead and jump into the Q&A.
Okay, the first one comes from Jesse Mills in the San Francisco Bay Area, and he says, what are the video file management software tools that the modern studio needs for automating local and cloud storage?
That's a good question. So, you're looking for a powerful MAM. That's, the most powerful one that we've seen in the cloud is also not the least expensive one. So, the one that we worked with over the summer and the fall was a Blackbird. Blackbird is amazing, but you'd have to work out some deal to be able to afford it. It's really, it's a costly, and most of the really powerful MAMs are going to be fairly expensive, to do well. What Blackbird does is let you stream straight to it. So all that stuff's going in. You can actually edit it while it's still streaming, and then you can set it for a variety of outputs and so on and so forth. It's very powerful as far as how it handles that content, but it's expensive. And it's not just expensive what you pay them; it's what you pay AWS to put it on your, to install you get a bunch of servers on AWS to make it work. I haven't used a lot of other ones. I have to admit, for me, most of the time, I'm very, if you haven't noticed, I'm very in the moment. So we create the content, and you guys are still lucky that I'm still going to YouTube. But I understand the value of that. But but I tend to be kind of like, okay, we're done with that. Let's move on. And so I do think there's a value in keeping all that content. But I tend to, because conversational content is not great to listen to later, not as good. I think it sometimes becomes less valuable. It doesn't have a long shelf life. Go ahead, Chris.
Have you heard of, has anybody here heard of Lucid Link?
I've not.
It's a cloud-based NAS that Scott Simmons has been, from Pro Video Coalition, has been doing a few tutorials and stuff on, and nobody's here heard of it. I will walk away. It's interesting. It's worth looking at.
Roscoe.
Yeah, I still think when you say video, I think 6K raw is a big file, and you still have to think really fast local storage. I use carbon copy cloner then to put that onto a RAID when I'm not accessing that fast local storage, and then I still use Dropbox to shove that stuff away for long term.
And Jesse, you're mostly thinking though about records of events, right? Just the raw records of the, not the raw like 6K, but really just the end product.
Yeah, thinking about an automated process that I could, press record, and it's going to just push it up to, it'll save on a local, and then it'll take that local up to the cloud without, pressing the sync button or something like that. I was thinking of something simple like FileZilla Pro or something along those lines to just store and move things around, on the more affordable end.
Well, yeah, and I think that there is lots of things that you can just save a file. That's a pretty straightforward. What I'm talking about is something that's probably much more complicated of check in, check out, and process, and big production, and so on and so forth. But I definitely think that there's a value to, you have a session and you just want that session to be available for people to listen, to watch. One of the things to think about in that area is how you get in and out of those sessions. So you'll notice one of the things we try to get our clients to do if they say we want to segment things is I try to add fade to blacks, to the event. Like, can we just do a fade to black right here? Can we do a fade to black right here? And I'll just tap on that fade to black. The reason I'm doing that is because I'm bringing all the audio and all the video down for a frame that I can go back and get, and so then I can clip those things, out. Now, typically with those, it's just little things to think about when you're doing a live show that you want to end up in pieces, or if you want to end up cutting it, being able to have a clearly defined area that you can get in and out of helps, just create a nice start, for that process. And it can be a still, it doesn't have to be black. It could be some still or something there, but just know that you're going to get to that, hit record, do what you're going to do. Now, a lot of times when we're doing records, what we do is we start 5 minutes out, and then we try to hit it right on, and if we don't get it, we still have the other record. Our backup record is essentially backing up our time as well. But we try to because what we've done also is we used to do a lot of events where we're streaming the event the moment the event ends. So we want to get to the end of the event, stop, and immediately start the playback within seconds. And to do that, we had to hit that endpoint just perfectly, in that process. And so figuring out how we're going to do that, it does create much better sessions to watch for the user. And those little things just have people feel like there's, more quality there. Go ahead, Charles.
Yeah, I have not found a good automation for that has not burned me in some way. So I tend to rely on myself just to make sure. So locally, I have it's OWC 36 terabyte. I built myself, set to RAID 5, and then I built another one, and I have that in a different location. I back up everything to this one, and then locally, I log into the other one and copy everything myself, just to make sure that everything's there. I've tried some automation things in the past, and files get corrupted, something happens, and I can't get access. So that's been the peace of mind that I have found, is just doing it myself on a budget-friendly way.
Go ahead, Roscoe.
Carbon copy Coney does checksums, and and then it will say, if it finds an error, it will say which way do you want to. I mean, it's really good at making sure you get good copies.
And then at the higher end, the other thing to look at is well, the Vanguard, but in general, Telestream has a lot of tools that are designed kind of for what you're talking about, where it is, you know, you can copy files to a folder and you say, I want this all to go here and I want this to go here. And you can build workflows I mean, that's a big part of Telestream's business, is to build workflows that say, just drops things into this folder and I'll build you everything you want to. I mean, like I can send it out to YouTube and Facebook and I can upload it to this server and you build the workflows. There's another, now my mind's turning on to your question. There's another workflow app for the Mac that I just can't think of.
Hedge?
No. But it's the same thing. It's a workflow manager. I want to call it, and I'll try to come up with it, but it's just on the tip of my
It's
tongue,
like the Automator or something like that.
Cat TV.
But it's like, it's got a bunch of basically workflows. You can build noodles, you know, you can do like a shake document or a nuke document. You can say, this is all the stuff I want you to do. And when I see this file, go do all these things and then put it all these places. And I just can't, it's like a 4-letter word. I want to say Pyle, but it's not. It's something else, but it's something, it's a workflow editor, and I just can't think of it at the moment. Next question.
Moving on, we have one from Tim Erskine, and Tim asks, from Cupertino, the main function for our studios is to do public access at night, and then during the day we rent out the space, and a lot of clients bring their own cameras. Some ask if we can supply a higher end camera. What camera should we have?
You're either going to use PTZs, but I'll almost always tell you, if you're not going to do PTZs, I'll almost always tell you get a Blackmagic camera. Price performance for live cameras, if you have a Blackmagic switcher, is unparalleled. Like there is no other, like for a live camera, you can talk about all kinds of other cameras, but if I want a live camera that I can shade, that is going to look good in a studio, it's going to be a Blackmagic camera. You know, we built one of the big advantages, if you really want clients to go, oh, I don't want to bring my own cameras, put a Super 35 sensor into the studio, because a Super 35 sensor is more than twice as big as the 2/3 inch sensor. And what it does is it makes the studio feel bigger because your depth of field shortens, you know, so your depth of field gets shorter and the studio will feel twice as big. So we've been in studios where I had, you know, 18 by 25 studio, you know, and, you know, with stuff around it, so it's even smaller, and it feels like a big studio because I'm using Super 35 sensors. I don't believe in studios of building any studio with a sensor size less than Super 35. Like I am, you know, adamantly opposed to small sensors because it makes you look more important. Super 35 makes you look more important. And if you're gonna put a studio, you know, it just does. It's got gravitas, you know, and 2/3 in little studios does not look good, and 1/3 looks even worse, and 1/4 and 1/2 and everything, those are worthless. So you're really talking about 2/3 and above, and then I would say 4/3 and 1/8, you know, and a 1 inch. But the thing is that you get into all those cameras and being able to shade the cameras and being able to automate your studio with the Blackmagic stuff. There's reasons to use Aries. There's reasons to use Grass Valley switchers. But for small studios, I don't understand when people do something other than Blackmagic for that. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I think that's a really good suggestion, but I was just wondering if you're going to have to order glass for your cameras. Would you go PL and get more broadcast lenses, or would you stay with EF and try to assemble glass that is fast enough but more manual?
In general, I would go with EF at this point. But if you're buying Blackmagic G2s, you can get the shims to go either way. So it's not like you just pop one on and one off, but there's kits for all these cameras that can go PL or Canon. But you know, you can usually get good glass for an EF, and it's just a lot cheaper and a lot easier for you to get started. Most of the big lenses that I've had, the Fujinons have all been PL, but you can get very similar things from Canon, and those are EF. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, like I would recommend that Tim talk to his potential clients and see what they're looking for to actually get the gauge of.
Sure. They don't know. They usually don't know what they're looking for. Like they, you know, and the thing is that the problem is that they'll have some broadcast person come in and say they want to use 2/3 inch chips because that's what they know how to do, and they just don't know any better. Like the broadcast folks don't know any better. They keep on wanting to go back to 2/3, and it's just especially for a studio where people are seated. Super 35 is just way better. Like it's just way better, and the cost per performance. I'm just talking about like actual return, but people will get caught up in, and I will admit, I know that you guys will be surprised, but I'm not a big fan of asking people, like when I'm doing production, I'm not a big fan of asking people for their opinion about what they want, because the thing is that it's often clients that don't know better that are talking to a old fashioned production person that are making decisions that are not modern. Like it's a really common problem that we have, is that we get caught into a spaghetti because some person who's been doing this for 35 years but hasn't done anything new for 10 is telling someone that doesn't know what they're doing how to do it. And that's a really common problem. And I'm just saying that the modern architecture is 35, super 35. Like there's no reason to go. There is a reason to go to 2/3. That's 75 feet. 75 feet, really good reason to go to 2/3. Sports, arguably reasonably good to do 2/3, because it's just, you need the depth of field. So there are reasons to do it, but in a studio, there's no reason to do it, in my opinion. Anyway, go ahead, Mickey, and then we're gonna do a special, because Greg has his hand up. We don't usually do this, but let Greg.
Greg was in the checks earlier, but asked to be brought out for a bit. But yeah,
Okay.
a fair point about dinosaur clients not really knowing what they want. Oh, sorry, what they need. But yeah, maybe like, because for me, I would think like, just to bring in the business, bring in what they would actually use, and maybe like buy 6 studio cameras of their choice, 2/3 or what, and then maybe bring 1 or 2 Ursas in there to show them, hey, like when they do their camera tests, hey, like here we can also offer this.
I think that here's what makes studios hard to work with and expensive to work with, is constantly changing the configuration. What makes studios efficient and what makes them work well is that you build out what needs to be there, and then you just say, this is what our studio does, and it will be cheaper. You can provide a better product for less money when you're not spending a ton of tech time retooling the studio. What makes studios expensive is retooling. What makes them really inexpensive for the client and high margin for the owner is you figure out what you're going to do well, you do that one thing well, you don't change it. Like, and you build it out so that there's lots of things. You want to build a bunch of features out. Like, so you want to be able to have up to 8 cameras, even though you've got 4. You build it, so you build it with headroom. You build it with, I can have a bunch of iOS devices connected to it. I can have, I got teleprompters on 2 or 3 of the cameras. I've got, you build it with headroom, but then you say, this is what we have, and I've worked definitely with studios that are just like, you can't change anything. This is the way it works. And the reason they do that is because they built a model, but it's less expensive for the client and it's more efficient for the owner. And sometimes the client and the owner are the same company if you're building it inside of a corporation. But what really it is a briar's patch for you to go into this situation where you go, we're going to constantly change our cameras and we're going to constantly change our lighting and we're going to constantly change. What you're better off doing is building something that's set, this is what we do. And the thing is, you will lose clients because you did that. But my argument will be is that you'll gain more clients by doing what you do really well than constantly being flexible, and that's the case in a lot of things. but I think that, being able to be cost effective is a big piece of the puzzle, and being able to have it always work. Like every time you're plugging stuff in and changing the cameras and rechanging the heads and changing where the teleprompters are and changing what those, and I've done that in studios where we did all of that and it was really flexible and we would give everybody what camera. The reason I'm so opinionated about this is because I did it for years. We're constantly rejiggering because we'd have clients that only wanted full frame sensors, and then we had other clients that only wanted super 35, and then we had the internal cameras that at the time were PTZ cameras, and so there's this constant and you spent literally an extra day with a crew every single time rejiggering it, where we could have just had you come in the morning and in 1 hour have a show. Now that, no matter who the client is, that day of 3 or 4 people setting up is expensive, no matter where you are, compared to You just walk in and do it, you know, and that's the, you know, I think that that's the bespoke solution makes sense for a lot of things, but it doesn't make sense in a studio environment, in my opinion, most of the time. Because you, especially now, you should be able to have a high volume business with a studio. Like it should, you know, and getting that price per, what I would say price per half day down. I think that what you want to think about is 4-hour windows for shows, you know, for most shows. And then clients have to buy 2 4-hour windows or 3 4-hour windows or whatever if they want to keep it in that state. But, you know, a 4-hour window is what you want to try to sell, in my opinion, what I'm planning to sell as a unit. We're talking to some folks about some studios. Go ahead, Bill.
And especially since the depreciation scale of things, I mean, it used to be we could amortize things over 10 years originally when it was the Betacam days, and then all of a sudden it was, you know, 6 years, and then suddenly now, 3 years after you buy and outfit a studio, there will be new technology that people will start asking for. And if you don't work out the numbers to depreciate that stuff over a increasingly smaller amount of time, you will find yourself with valueless equipment. But
the good news is
get it together, get it right, and then change when you're going to change when you really need to change.
But like, for instance, the stuff that I bought in 4K, you know, Super 35 sensors that I bought in 2016, 5 years ago, would still be perfect for a studio. Are there slightly better cameras? Sure, but it literally, it's going to be good for another 5 years. And this is stuff that amortized itself in 3 months. You know, so, you know, it's there, that's the whole thing. And that's why I'm so, like, I don't play with the bigger stuff, because it's just like, I need it to amortize quickly. Now there are things that hurt, like routers, because Blackmagic's behind. Go ahead, Nikki.
And yeah, this is off not related to Tim's question, but since we're on the topic of studios, just generally speaking, the things such as, like, say, infrastructure and sound equipment, those if you buy good ones from the get-go, they will last. Like, you know, I've used microphones from Greg's that are way older than myself, and they still work perfectly.
Right. No, and what I will say about a studio environment in general also, and this is a studio environment, a warehouse environment, a crew environment in general, is what I call soft hands. You know, is treat all the equipment with soft hands. And I make decisions, just so you know, if you're on one of my teams, I will make a decision about whether you're going to remain on my team by how you put the SDI cables into the SDI router. Like, if I see you go like this and just push them in, you know, you're not going to stay with me very long. Like, because I can't afford it. I can't afford for you to break my equipment, you know? And so when I see you delicately put stuff in and make sure that it's just right, and plug things in carefully and do that last little bit carefully, I go, oh, that's the kind of person I can work with in a warehouse, in a studio, whatever. But hard, you know, it's the last inch of when you're setting something down, the last inch does all the damage to your equipment over time. It's how someone drops it on the table or puts things down or whatever it is. That carelessness reduces the lifeline of the life expectancy of all your equipment. And the problem is it's random. It's not like a wire hanging out. It's something goes haywire a long time from now. Go ahead, Chris.
I was explaining this to my stepdaughter last week, and I said, everything breaks every day a little bit.
Right.
It's breaking every day a little bit.
Yeah. Next question.
Moving on, Christian Pelving of Sweden says, what size in all dimensions is the preferred size for a medium to large studio that can host approximately 5-person panel, and more possibilities for backdrops, depths, and LED walls?
So the last thing that you said, I'll start with an LED wall. You need, if the pitch of the LED wall is more than 1 millimeter, you need 25 feet from the person to the wall to not get moire. I just did these tests, like literally just did, like, sat on a stage testing how close do we have to be to the LED wall. It's 25 feet before, otherwise you're going to have zoom angles and zoom stuff. So you get a pitch, standard pitch is like 3.2, 2.8, something like that. You're going to get all kinds of moire that is popping up. Someone sent an example for me to look at on Twitter, and I was like, this is why I don't, I think I retweeted it recently. Like, this is why you don't use LED walls. It was some concert that someone did, the Super Bowl concert. the post concert or the little small business concert or whatever. Yeah, look at that. That's why you don't use LED walls. So be careful with LED walls. They seem like everyone's selling them right now. Like this is the future. Yeah, at 0.7, 0.9 mil, it's the future. You know, at 2.8, 3.2, not the future, the past, a painful past that a lot of us have had to live through for the last 5 years. You know, really think through that. Green screen, I will also say, is difficult because you really have to get the lighting right. And you think that, you think that I'll just throw a green screen back there. Problem is, okay, 3 or 4 cameras from different angles with the cameras reframing, and you have to accurately measure that. Even if you're not ever going to cut to them moving, the camera's moving, it becomes a real thing. Now, this is where the Panasonic one, I think the 150s, have telemetry that they'll feed back into Unreal. And so that's where you start to make the argument, if you really want a green screen, that the Panasonics are something to look at for that, because you can reframe it and it will change the position in Unreal to give you a virtual set that makes sense. But just know that that's a technically complex solution. It's not just like, oh, we can just throw it together. Go ahead, Bill.
My answer to this is going to be less than you think, and here's the reason I say that. It's easy to just say, I want to build bigger and bigger, but remember, you got HVAC costs, you've got real estate costs. The more space you're taking up, the harder it is to sustain things if you run into a downturn and suddenly people are not calling for a summer or whatever because something happened. I mean, COVID being a perfect example of that. So the smallest, most compact footprint that can get things done for you is going to be the more efficient over the long run. So pay good attention. I had a little insert studio, and I think I can pop up a picture of it. Let me make it bigger. We did, whoops, there we go. We could do 5 people on that with a piece of cake, and it was about, I think ended up about 2,000 square feet, converted hay barn. And, you know, you just have to know where the camera's going to be. You know what your widest shot is, the lenses you normally look at, and you don't need as much room as you think you do if you're really efficient about building it out. And man, not having in Arizona to air condition more space than that every single day the studio was open was a big financial deal.
What I would say is that after doing a bunch of these, I would say 30 by 40 feet is about what I'd ask for, you know, minimum. A little bigger if I can get it. So that's still less than the 2,000 that Bill was talking about, but 1,200 square feet, 1,500 square feet. But the 30 by 40 is about the minimum that I'd want. And really a 40 by 50 is really what I'm looking at for the main stage. Then you want to remember that you really want your control room somewhere else. Don't put your gear in there. You know, there's 1,000 reasons not to put gear in your studio, and you can't talk. You've got equipment noise. You can't manage. There's so many things that you can't manage in that area. You can't keep it cool. You know, so the thing is that it's much easier with LED lights and cameras. It's pretty easy to keep a large space cool with just people, but you put all that equipment in, you want that actually to be in a perfect world. The equipment goes into its own little room that has its own HVAC that keeps it at 60, 65 degrees. And you wire everything else out. You have a control room. I'll see if I can find a picture of some of the stuff, but you have a control room that you then, you know, work from there. Go ahead, Chris.
You know, one thing that a lot of people don't think about when they're thinking about studio space is the space that is not the control room and not the sound stage. You need a certain amount of space just for tools, sets, a workshop. And people don't, I have 10 chairs. Where do you put them when you don't need them? You need a bit of, you know,
and you want them in the same building
just for that.
A lot of office buildings will have some cage space somewhere. You don't want to pay premium retail to store your stuff. I built one in DC, and the challenge really is that in DC it was you know, $28-$30 a foot, you know, and I want to pay $10 or $15 a foot, you know, for where I'm, you know, or less, where I'm storing things. Now, one thing that we did do for sets, we built a modular set that you could actually tear apart and put back together. And so you could literally swap the set in a couple hours, that a completely different look, using a metal substructure. But you keep the other sets, you build nice little boxes for them. You keep them in a warehouse that's half an hour away. And we bring them in when they, you know, like when someone brought in that set is you know, we know how to get it in and out one of the things to think about with all of those things is logistics. Like how am I going to get things in and out in an office building? What were you gonna say, Chris? You looked like you were about to say something about.
Well, I was going to say that I can't tell you how many times I've been on a crew where you look at the number of people, you say, okay, you total them up. You could easily be spending $1,000 an hour in labor moving that set. You got to
Right.
you got to keep that in mind too.
You think about how to. So again, when you think about your sets, you want to think about how they're going to get packaged up so that they're really fast. And we got it down to 2 or 3 hours. The goal was to get it to 45 minutes, and then I had to close the studio for other reasons, because virtual events weren't a big deal. I'd be printing money right now. I'd be driving a Maserati if that studio was still open during COVID. So I wouldn't. I would just buy another Elemental. We just joke. Like I always say, I could buy a Ferrari, but I wouldn't buy a Ferrari. I'd buy an Elemental or an EVS. I mean, that's I keep on driving my little 10-year-old van. Go ahead, John.
Growing up here in Vegas, I've seen dozens and dozens of studios be built and then shortly thereafter closed down. And it appears that they spend too much time on the technical aspects of the studio and not marketing of the actual studio itself.
Yeah. So marketing the studio is a big deal. Also, again, thinking about the set, you really have to figure out how you're going to manage a set for different clients. So there's basically a couple different ways of doing those sets. One set is that you do, curtains. You can change the curtains there. You can end up with between two ferns look where you have a couple plants and some veils and stuff like that. Or you have to build out a set that looks the same all the time for clients, and you have to be very careful about that. Or you have to build something that's highly modular. And we went with the highly modular, which took us a long time to design, and I have patents for it. so of how to do it, but it's all like magnets, no screwdrivers. Like that was my big thing, no screwdrivers. So you can just pop all the panels on, and even the windows in, and the shelves in, and everything else, and just snap them in. It was a lot easier than screwdrivers. Go ahead, Roscoe.
I was going to say, as soon as you're going to do live cutting in the studio, then yeah, I'd say the gear has to get out of there. But if you're just going to be recording to cameras and stuff, you can with today's stuff, it's pretty quiet. The fans really don't make that much noise. So we have a cart that's got the monitors, the Mac Mini on it, and all that right in the production space. I never hear it.
Mm-hmm. I'm mostly thinking about live studios, but yeah. I mean, that's how I think, but I can definitely see that. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, and don't forget, it's not always just about the video and the lighting and the rest of that. Sound becomes critical, and the bigger your space, the harder it is to abate sound. That big black drape down there, I've never used it as a background, but that was my primary sound diffuser, and it's on a curtain track that I could bring around so that it would close off the entire front where the camera's point of view is, just to kick down echoes from the longest dimension in the studio.
Yeah, and then also 12 feet high. That's what you want to try to get to if you can. Everything below that is painful, because you just need enough room for the lights to be able to hang them and make them work. I've worked in a lot of office buildings. Someone's got an open mic. You can build in office buildings that are, a lot of times if they have hanging ceilings, a lot of times we try to remove the hanging ceiling. But for small studios, you can actually get scissor clips that will let you attach baby pins to the hanging ceilings. You'd be surprised at how much light you can hang from a hanging ceiling. I put Kinoflow 4x4s up there, lots of them, and they're all hanging from the hanging ceiling. But you have to be very conscious of where the mounts are that are coming down, and where you put them. Next question.
Moving on to Brian Stockton of Des Moines, Iowa, and he asks, looking to repurpose a spare bedroom in our house, I'd like to have some type of grid-like system on the ceiling to hang lights, monitors, and other items that will allow me to change the layout of the room occasionally. Oh, and as always, budget-friendly.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
So what I have up here, I'm going to show you my ceiling here. Basically, these are the those not curtain rods, but the closet rods, the extendable closet rods that you can put in. You can also use curtain rods. Actually, I got another studio that has that, and you can find clamps. I found those on Amazon that I have up here, and of course they're directly into a stud rather than on a ceiling with anchors. And they hold a pretty good amount. I have the crossbar system because I do have one camera overhead that points down on the table, and of course a light as well, as you saw there. But that's probably one of the cheapest. It was under $100 to put that all together.
Mine, I don't have a way to easily grab the camera right now. Maybe I do. I'll try to show it in a second. But mine are just pipes, that I bought at the hardware store. About $250 of them, but I built a whole grid with them. So they're like it's actually a grid with those pipes. It's not what I would suggest as a professional solution, but at my house, it's worked out pretty well. I can hang a lot of things from them. But I'll let Bill do it while I see if I can connect an iPhone.
Because he knew that I'm ready for this. Because in the studio, one of the things that I thought was time is money, and you got people coming in and coming out. So I put in a full-scale IFF studio rail system, and there you see 3 of the cross rails that are on trucks that you can.
How much are those?
Well, this is a Bogan product, and I think when I built the whole thing out, I probably spent between $3,000 and $4,000 on all the rails, all the curved track around the outside, and I think you can see that. There's the curtain track plus another track that I used in front of the curtain track. The curtain track's the one on the left. The right one I could hang pantographs or instruments from to do backlights and things like that. So, and you can see a little piece of the regular rail system back and forth. It curtains one thing, but you can also hang pantographs off to move lighting up and down in terms of where you want to aim things. It's just really fast and really convenient to get things moved where you want them. And if you can work in all axes, so you can move things X, Y, and even more importantly, up and down, it means you can bring a light over, drag it down into space exactly where you want it if you're having trouble with getting a light under a ball cap or something like that. Just super fast, get it where you want it, and then you move on to the shot. Investing in that does save you a lot of labor time and getting your head out of the shoot while you're doing it.
Did we lose Alex? I think we've got oh, there he is.
I muted you, Alex, because you were making noise.
Yep, go ahead.
I'll just touch on the fact that I'm here in a very small room. It's 7 by 11 feet. This is the studio that I run, which is based in, I'll take another camera shot here for you in a second to show you the back of this so that you can get an understanding of how I mounted it. This rack mount is basically a rack for a 3-monitor setup, but I ended up adding another rack. I bought 2 of them and took the 2 bars off of one rack and mounted it on top of the other, which allowed me to put 5 monitors on one rack. And then the other bar sits over here to set off the external monitor for closed captioning. So 2 machines, 6 monitors, 2 control surfaces, and 2 keyboards all fit in a 7 by 10 square.
And then this is my little mess here that you can kind of see. Where you can see these are just C-stands that are holding this up. You can see that I've attached a couple different sets of lights. There's the T. So this is just all of the stuff is just simply just attached within it. And I bought this when I really was before I had a new job, and so I was really cost sensitive. So it was $300 probably in hardware to put it together. And what I will say for any studio is you need a grid. However you build it, if you build it out of PVC pipe, if you build it out of plumbing, if you build it out of, you need to put a grid up for a studio, because otherwise you make bad decisions around lighting. Because you make it based on where you can put things and what how to do it and everything else. You got to get your lights off the ground. You just have to. You can fill in a couple places here and there, but if you get them off the ground, now, the reason I put them on C-stands, by the way, is I can lower the entire thing down, fiddle with my stuff, and then push it back up again. And so being able to have a grid that you can move up and down. Now, the next version of this is going to be hanging from the ceiling, and it's going to be speed rail and everything else that allows me to do that in the next couple months. But this worked. It's worked for the last little bit of time. Next question.
Moving on to Tim Erskine of Cupertino, California. And Tim asks, we are in the process of building a new studio in our old studio. We had tungsten lights, mostly 30-year-old Fresnels, and a few scoops and ellipsoidals. What are the basic lights that you would buy today? And note, we are not able to use tungsten in our new studio, and you shouldn't anyway.
Well, yeah, we would never use tungsten.
Crazy inefficient.
I mean, I don't think anyone's really, no modern studio that I know of is getting built with anything other than LEDs. So it's just you're going to pick what kind of LEDs you want to use, and how much money you have and what you can put together. But you shouldn't use. I mean, Kinoflow is even moving to LEDs. So there's the kind of in the super cost effective. There's Newer makes some stuff in the middle range, which I wouldn't recommend. There's a whole bunch Scotty or Skibidi or something like that. They're all in kind of a less expensive range, and that's going to be painful over time. The middle range, the middle path is really Nanlite and Aperture. They're both kind of compete, and they've got both of them have kind of a wide group of it. I happen to use a lot of Nanlite. In fact, almost everything I have is Nanlites. But they're very similar in cost and performance. Are the two there to put stuff in. And then when you go to the higher end, you're talking about the, Airy, Airy / KinoFlow / light panel, some of the high end light panel stuff. So those are kind of the different ranges. You just have to choose between what your budget will support. Go ahead, Charles.
Yeah, if you're putting up main large source lights, I have used some Apertures, those are great. I have some Nanlites. Then I found some slightly more budget friendly, but you lose some of the options. I use some, let me see. These from Generay, I've shown before. They're very cost effective for the amount of power that they put out. If you need large source lights, I've used them for shoots with giant softboxes. I mean, like 60-inch softboxes, 80 inches, and they're great. You do lose the ability to control per percent. So they go up in increments of 10, so you lose that, but they do have a remote. So I've had up to 8 of these on a set, and I've been able to control them just while I'm sitting down on the couch and I'm watching how things are looking on the monitor. They've been a bit more cost effective than the Apertures and the Nanlites, but there's a lot of great options that you get when you do step up to the Apertures and the Nanlites that you don't get with these. So that's something to consider.
The one thing that I would say is that there's 2 things that I would generally look for in a studio at this point, knowing what I know now, is 1 is being able to control the color of my lights, and 2 is having DMX control. And there's a lot of cool things that a lot of them have, whether it's Bluetooth or network or whatever, but having just strong DMX support really makes life easier, because now you're able to, you have a board, you can control everything, you can change all these other bits and pieces, and you can build all the cool things you want to do. There's so many different tools, whether they're QLab or Isadora or many other tools that are going to let you design how those lights all work, and let you build setups. I wouldn't get too crazy about the high end stuff, because you'll end up running around with your iPad or your iPhone trying to program your lights. It's great to have those apps, but you don't want to buy something without DMX. You'll be up there all the time trying to change them. So you want DMX at least. And then if you can, I'm buying bicolor for everything, just because I want to be able to, I don't want to have to put filters on them or anything else. I just want to be able to dial in the color that I need for that specific show. Next question.
Moving on to Sky Gleason from Seattle. Soundproofing the walls were before audio filters in the mixers. I have a possibility of a large barn. Can I create an intimate audio experience in a large space?
You can create anything with enough time and money. So let's just be clear. I just want to set the thing. Anything can be done with enough time and money. Go ahead, Greg.
Well, you stole my first answer. But yeah, I mean, I know plenty of guys. There's a lot of guys here, in fact, in Norway, because there's so many farms. There are a lot of studios in barns, and they're fantastic. You've got the height, the space, and they shape they have the ability to shape the inside. It's all about creating now that new space inside the larger space.
Are they
and
floating
you can
them?
custom build
These
it.
studios? They're floating these. They're floating these studios.
Yeah, don't get rid of the parallel walls. Do a little something on the ceiling. There's all kinds of this stuff. But the thing that's really exciting in the U.S. that I think everybody forgets about is Owens Corning 703. That's everybody's favorite friend. Because it just takes care of so many problems. Right away, and you don't have to spend a lot of time. You can mount stuff on the walls. You can mount stuff actually a couple inches off the wall, which is how you can hang it. So it's reversible. You want a reflective space, you take it down. You want absorption, you put it up. There's so much stuff. The barn is a great idea. I want in on that design.
Yeah,
Sky.
I mean, the big thing with barns, at least the ones that we've dealt with, is just really paying attention. We talked about this, I think, when Sky brought it up first, is the roof. Is just know what the roof is going to do in rain. I mean, and with every building that you're building a studio into, you want to be in that building when it's raining, even in Vegas. That you want to be. It doesn't rain very often, but when it does, you want to know what it's going to sound like. So definitely think about that. You know, in most places that I've been, I've really designed, when I want to get a new space, I spend a couple days working in the space just with a laptop, just doing whatever, email and everything else. I'm listening. I just want to, over time, I just want to hear what that does. We had one that I thought was going to be gorgeous at the top of a building in San Francisco, big metal top, and it makes a lot of noise when it rains. And so you just have to, but it didn't for most of the, I was there for 3 days. The fourth day it rained just a little bit. And I realized I couldn't build something in here that would work. Go ahead, Bill.
When I was doing the conversion, that was a post and tin hay barn, the studio that I just showed you pictures of before. And so we had to insulate it. I mean, you can't work sound in something like that. So we ended up at the end of it, if I talked from the inside wall to the outside, it ends up with a piece of standard 1/2-inch wall board. Inside of that was a piece of 3/4-inch MDF. And MDF, medium density fiberboard, is incredibly heavy. When we were doing the cladding of the ceiling, I needed 5 guys working to hold up and nail in place those ceiling pieces of MDF. Then inside of that, there's the post, the 4-inch post, fiberglass bats between that, then a layer of plywood on top of that, and then stucco on top of that. So we're talking 6 layers between the inside of the studio and the outside world. And even with that, encapsulating the entire building, when it rained, we could not do live sound if the rain was heavy. So you're not going to get perfect. I will say that the other thing I decided to do, we didn't pierce that barrier ever. And we had doors that were sound resistance, but we didn't even put conduit through for the electric. All the electrical was done inside surface mount so that we didn't have to breach the barrier that we had built to encapsulate the studio.
There's 2 things that I've seen done to barns, specifically that were the more fascinating for sound. One is they sprayed the roof with this kind of rough material, and then they put these little coils that I guess you can buy for gardening. It's like a kind of a coily mess that they use to kind of put into things to give structure for plants. And so they had this rough top spray, and then they put these coils that are about 1 inch thick, and they just went all the way down the roof. Now, it wasn't the cheapest solution, but it was gone. Like you're in a rainstorm, because what happens is the coils diffuse the rain. As it hits, it splats it out, and then it hits this rough kind of softy material. And it you could hear like a little, but it was like, it had been like, you can't talk to someone before that. And then after that, it was down, it literally dropped it, I don't know, 40, 50 dB. I mean, it was like incredible. The second one is the coolest one that I saw. I think this was in Oregon. They planted grass on it. They put some kind of structure and they just planted grass on the roof. And I was like, that's a horrible thing. In the long term, I was like, I don't know if this is going to work. It's going to be a mess. But it's really quiet. Grass on the roof turns out to be really, really quiet. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, inside the barn itself, I would put acoustic baffles hung from the ceiling, wooden frames filled with what Greg mentioned, OC703, and covered up with fabric, and make sure these are angled. Make sure the angle isn't parallel to the ground, so you have reflections that are going in at a different angle from the source, so that they're not creating standing waves. And I assume this would be a semi non-permanent setup. So I don't know what you guys use, what you call it in the US, but here we call it hog's hair, which is essentially like HVAC, what do you call this, filters. And we put layers of that on the roof, on top of the roof itself, and that gets rid of like noise from rain. And you can buy it in large rolls, so you can just lay it on the.
And obviously, Mickey has chosen not to do that for his own office.
Oh, here, no. I'm at home.
Yeah. Next question.
Tyler Roberts of Chambersburg says, what is the basic computer that can smoothly play video into a Zoom call? Setting up classrooms with a Facebook portal with Zoom for camera and a computer attached to the TV to play videos for the classroom and into Zoom call via screen share. Used an old laptop and had buffering of the videos. Devices need to be wired to an intern? No, that doesn't sound right.
Go ahead, Chris.
Put me in, coach. Put me in. Okay, so the only way to play a video smoothly into a Zoom call is if you trick it into thinking that it's a webcam. So Alex will tell you that Zoom always balances between frame rate and resolution. And that's why my motion is somewhat smooth, because it is favoring frame rate. Now, if I were to do the screen share, it'll say, oh, let's give a lot of resolution, but much less frame rate. So to screen share a video roll, you're going to give up frame rate. What you need to do is use any number of devices, whether they are software or hardware, to take your video, whether it's playing off of a laptop or whatever, and trick Zoom into thinking it's yet another webcam. Then you spotlight it and everything looks smooth. We can go as deep into that as you want.
And there is a new, just so you know, that there is a new option that you can do that is in Zoom under advanced. You'll see video, share video, and you can share the video, and it'll give you a video to select, and it will play it out, optimizing for video. So if you just want to play it into Zoom, it's we haven't really tested it that much, but I know it's there, and people have said it works. But it's really saying, oh, I want to play an actual video, and it'll play that video out. Go ahead, Roscoe.
No ProRes, H.264 only.
Just H.264. Yeah. So just know that. Next question.
Moving on to James Babbitt of San Diego here. And James says, a temple plans to build a new hall and is now at the blueprint stage and planning for the audio recording, internet streaming, and so forth. What steps would you take in designing the installation?
Fiber. Every time we talk to someone who's building, like, oh, we're going to build a new building, fiber. 12 TAC 12 minimum into every single room. It is so cheap to do that, like compared to the entire construction thing. Now, the only thing I'll say is you put the fiber in right before you close the walls. Don't do it any earlier than that, because unless you put it into a conduit, because people cut it by accident. And so then it's expensive and painful. But build conduit, design conduit to go between all the rooms. If you're going to build a floor, raise all the floors so that they're at least 6 inches off the core, so that you can have it's incredible. Like you go to the tech building at Lucasfilm, and there's this right down the center of the hallways, there are these different slats, right? They can lift those things up, and all the wiring is available to them all the time. And in computer server rooms and all this other stuff, you want to lift that thing up. Some of them go up as much as 1.5 feet. You don't have to do that. 6 inches is enough. You don't have to crawl down there. But lifting rooms up where there's events is super valuable, because it also just means there's no GAC. But fiber makes just this massive difference. Other things I can say that are not related to audio or video, but power distribution, having 100 amp drops, having, 3-phase drops, in places. If you're going to build something, it may seem like a lot for a temple or a church or whatever to do, but wow, does it make things easier? Like when we walk into a theater or a church or something that has it, it just solves so many problems. And so, but the big thing is making sure that you can communicate between the rooms. You never know where you're going to want to broadcast in the future. In the near future of what we're talking about, every room should be considered a studio, like a potential studio that's either really well fit right now or not yet. But you want to have the communication into all those rooms, set up. And we've been in a couple of places where they did this. It's magical. It's magical. Like everything you want to do, and we're going to go to 3 different rooms. We're going to do all this other stuff, and it all works. Getting stuff in there, getting it out. Fiber means that you're only going to be limited by your imagination, because light carries so much data, and 12 strands of it. And then the big thing is conduit that you can pull it through, so you can always go to the next thing when you need to. Go ahead, Roscoe, and then Bill.
All sources of noise, HVAC systems, any kind of machinery, anything, get it as far away from your studio as possible. Just don't think one wall is going to stop that sound.
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
I'm going to add to the conduit boxes, outlet boxes in places you never thought of. I'm going to tell you 2 stories. Every time I go to an executive office and I try to plug in to do a shoot in their office, it turns out there's one outlet with 4 taps over behind their desk, and there's another one behind the credenza that you cannot move because it's built in and you can't get to it. So I'm stuck trying to power lights and stuff for a temporary shoot in an office, and it's a nightmare. The other piece of that is that when I built that studio, I put 4 quad boxes at the far end of the room where I thought the battery charger is going to go here, and I was going to just do like maybe 4 or 6 outlets. I ended up with 4 quad boxes, so 12. 90% of the use of the studio, 90% of those were in use.
Yeah,
You
and
never
think about,
have enough outlets.
if you're in that design phase, also think about building a control room for the building. Like it's a control room. All that fiber that I'm talking about comes back to a central switch, and it means that I can run events. And you want that control room to be able to handle 1 large event and up to 3 or 4 small events. I think that we're about to move to a new phase in how we communicate with the public, and a lot of it's going to have to do with streaming. And you have to be ready if you're going to be. People are going to be more and more expecting to be able to. Oh, I want to see the stream. I want to have contact with them. And if you're not thinking that way, those big churches that are generating a lot of revenue, generating a lot of donations, a huge portion of those donations are coming from online. There's a lot of people, but you should not underestimate what high quality, constant contact with your parishioners or have to do with it. So I would highly recommend really thinking of the whole space as a studio. Next question.
Carol Herndon of Raleigh-Durham, North Carolina says, for years I've managed continuing education webcasts, small or medium shows, dozens to a few hundred online audience. If the landscape has changed so drastically, what additional interactivity tools should be considered beyond Q&A, polling, and so forth? Note, not really studio related, and I can ask this during the first hour another day, but I think it's up to you, Alex.
We'll talk a little bit more about this as we keep moving forward. But one of the big things is it's beyond the Q&A. It's being able to respond to the Q&A and the polls interactively. So, so being able to, the older way of doing this is to do, I have a PowerPoint or I have a talk and you're all going to watch, and then we're going to open up to Q&A. The future of this, in my opinion, is I have all the media, a digital whiteboard, not behind me. That's silly. A Wacom tablet or an iPad in front of me. I have all those bits and pieces at my fingertips, and I can interactively engage with the audience. I have content that I'm going to cover. Let me show you a movie. Let me show you a still. I'm going to show you a couple of things, and I'm going to bounce around, and I can draw on any of those. I can talk to it. I can jump to different pieces of content. I can jump to web pages. I can jump to all those things. So giving people the tools that they need to do that, and the tools that they need to interact with other people. So I don't want to be limited to who can come to my studio. I don't need, it doesn't, for Raleigh, I don't have to worry about who can get to Raleigh. It should be, I can get to anyone, anywhere in the world. Some of the classes that I've taught in Rwanda, I'm teaching. I got someone from AFI teaching, or USC teaching, editing. We did a class, and so I have an editing instructor from USC. I have myself. I've had Nick Justishin, who's not here right now, but come in all over the world, and then the students are sitting in Kigali, Rwanda, and we're having a fully interactive talk, going through stuff and talking through it. That's the thing you want to be thinking about, is how do I interact where anybody can be, I can bring anybody in, talk to them face to face. I can interact with that content. The speakers can be anywhere in the world. The audience can be anywhere in the world. And I truly think that the studios that I'm talking about, that I don't think very many people are thinking about, are in their DNA, are able to do that. Go ahead, John.
Hey, Alex, did you see that video I posted in Discord a couple weeks back with that math teacher that has that really cool light board?
I have seen that light board. I just feel like it's not competitive to a Wacom tablet.
It looks better though. It lights up because it's under fluorescent tubes, right? So the drawing is really bright.
I have to admit that I was doing an example of that a week or two ago, and I don't, maybe it was on a Sunday, so it might not have been during the week. But with mine, I'm sitting there I'm drawing on a thing, and doing exactly what it's doing, except that I'm doing it on a Wacom tablet instead of on a piece of glass. And the Wacom tablet's less expensive, less to set up, less to shoot through. Especially now, the new Wacom tablets now that are like $400 or $450 or something, that have the screen in them, is the trick to the whole thing. But we'll talk more about that. But the problem is that I get this, but there's so much. So you have to be careful of having what's available to you technologically limit what you do as an instructor. And when you start putting physical things in the world to do that, you are limited to what that you can do in that box. Now you have to erase it. Now you have to do something else. Like with my Wacom tablet, I literally push a button on the cursor and it blanks out. Like it just goes, okay, you're ready to do something else. And I'm getting ready to program that all into the Mini and a Stream Deck. So I just push a little button, it clears it, and so I think that getting limited by physical apparatus is something that I'm trying to avoid, at least in the ones that I'm building.
He obviously rehearses because he knows exactly where to draw on the screen to leave the little side where he's standing up.
And that's great. And I can do the same thing digitally and for less money and more flexibility, and I can move faster. So that's the challenge with it. Next question.
Comes from Tim Erskine in Cupertino, and he says, we host an insert studio in our main office. Is there a market if we built our own in our studio that's in another building, not to compete with their studio, but to take lower level clients?
Oh yeah, go ahead, Bill.
So this is a little bit of a soapbox topic for me because at the beginning,
keep it quick because we're already over time and we still got 7 questions.
Okay. Client of mine, they put huge amounts of money into a corporate studio. COVID hit. It's been empty the entire time. I'm doing 90% of their work by taking remote stuff out and shooting. I don't think it's ever going back to the way it was before. So I'm not a believer in trying to staff up and keep that going in a diffused organization. I'm a believer in the person who knows how to use the equipment should try to keep the equipment close to them and figure out ways to deploy it when it's necessary.
So I'm gonna counter in this conversation that I think that corporations, organizations, and individuals should be building insert studios, one per floor. You can't invest in quality audio, video, everything for every person to be at home doing it. They need to have a place. Like once we move past this whole, like we can't go into our offices and we can go into the office, you want to be able to you can't diffuse, $100,000 worth of hardware to everybody's house, but they should have a $2,000 or $3,000 kit. But when you really want to do it, where I really want all that stuff to be there, and I don't want them to have to deal with it in their house or in their location, they need somewhere to go that's going to let them, have a good background, sound good, look good, and be part of larger interactive conversations where they don't have to think about it. And I think that's what all these, what we saw constantly is us having to build up in these large companies. And I felt like they should have one of these things in every floor. WeWork should have one on every floor for small businesses that can't afford to have all that stuff there and just needs to be able to walk in and it works. And to make it walk in and just work is $100,000 of hardware or $50,000 of hardware. It's not $3,000 that you cobble together, and it's a person, one tech person that can help you put it together. And then, you want to think about centrally controlling them and a whole bunch of other things. But anyway, go ahead, Bill.
I was just going to talk about the head count. You kind of talked about it, one person who can, but is that one person per floor, one person for group of floors? That's all they think about these days is labor costs.
In a given building, you need one tech person for the whole building. That's, if it's all remote, if it's all IP controlled and all the other things, you just need someone to help them, pop into it. They don't have to be, they don't need a college degree. They just need to be well-trained and smart. And then what you want to do is bring all the control back into a central unit. And that doesn't have to be geologically anywhere near what you're doing. So like, for instance, Bloomberg, their remote studios in Hong Kong are run from London. Not kind of run from London, but like there is the only thing the tech person does in Hong Kong is put on the mic. And if something needs to be replugged or whatever, that's the only thing they do. And they've been doing this for a decade. And so the thing is that, and that's an insert studio with someone who comes into Bloomberg and talking from Hong Kong, but there is no person there. Like all the show notes, they're running all the audio, all the video, all the cameras, all the lighting, everything is being run out of London. And so that is, and that's not even cutting edge at this point. Like so the thing is as a large organization, putting all those kinds of studios in, and then you have a tech person you need someone on the ground that can do something if they have to, but you definitely don't need them to run anything. Next question.
Moving on, Mark Harder of Brooklyn says, please don't forget to mention the amount of space needed for the people in computers streaming and doing Zoom work. How many times have we all seen that part of the show is in a hallway, a corridor, or a lobby?
Yeah, you definitely need a control room. You need to build out a control room that is isolated, that has that lets you, it's sound isolated. I used to think that the control room had to be close enough that it had a window into the studio, but we just use micros now, like the Blackmagic micros. I can have like 4 of them and just have a split that I look up at, and I can see more than I ever saw through a window. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah. Also, don't forget the things like loading docks or loading ramps, and where will you put your catering and all of that?
Mm-hmm.
Where will you put your clients?
Yeah, where you put your clients. And so one of the things about that we could probably do a whole second hour on, but we won't, is remember that the green room is very valuable. The green room is, when we think about it, we're like, a lot of times people put bad green rooms in. That's a horrible idea. So I spent a lot of energy on green rooms, and they should be comfortable. They should make people feel like they're at home, and they're branding opportunities. So you have pictures of your other, like on mine, I printed on metal behind the scenes photos of my productions, and we had them all along the thing. And you have a great routable, a couple monitors that I can show you the inside of the studio. I can show you the program really big, and all of those are routable. So it's not like we're trying to figure out how to send it to you. Like literally just on our router. Okay, I want to send that to that monitor. I want to have a speaker in there that I can talk to people. I want to have a mic that is physically disabled, can be physically disabled in the room. So if someone, because we work in politics, you don't want a mic in the room that you can't unplug. But like little things like the table, we built into the table all these insertable power supplies with chargers, just so but they pop out. So they pop up and pop down into the, so the table looks really nice, and you can pop it all up and pop it down. They had plants, you have an iron, you have a place to put the food, you have a place to work, that's where you want to have a place to do hair and makeup there with, and so you think about all those things, but it should look really nice. Remember that the people paying you are going to spend most of their time in the green room. So the people who actually write the checks and people who decide whether you're worth the money that you're charging are sitting in your green room most of the show. So, when you don't spend a lot of money in your green room, you're not putting your best foot forward to the people who actually pay you. Next question.
James in Dublin, Ireland says, what is bicolor, and what's the best and or minimum color range for lights?
Go ahead, Bill.
So the original bicolor was there were LEDs that you could choose to have either close to daylight, 5200 Kelvin, 3200 Kelvin, or I'm sorry, 6000 Kelvin for daylight, or tungsten 3200. So the early LED arrays had a mixture of 32 and 6000 or so, 5600 Kelvin beads, and you could turn them on to mix between the two. That's what a bicolor light is. It can do either daylight or tungsten balanced.
Mm-hmm. Next question.
Andrew Lipnick of San Francisco says, other than using headphones, any suggestions for isolating the audio app, I guess, if they have to be in the same operator, if they have to be in the same control space as video? Pet peeve is mixing a show in the same room with all the white noise produced by the video gear fans.
Yeah, go ahead, Roscoe.
Around them with Sonex. You can literally build them a cage right behind them if you have to, or hang some cloth.
In most studios, we work pretty hard to we don't always succeed, but we try to give the audio person their own room, like literally put them in their own space so that they can really hear what's going on. It's not always possible, but you definitely, and again, equipment gear, you're trying to put into a server room or somewhere else. You don't want anyone listening to that. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, you can also build baffles that are on wheels, and you can essentially make a small divider between you and the main video portion of the control room, but you'll have to set up your own monitors for that, for you to be able to get the multi-view.
Yeah. And lots of sound blankets. We've used, in a temporary area, we've dropped, just put up we've kind of rigged up a bunch of sound blankets, 2 or 3 against each, like on one side of the speed rail and on the other, creates a little bit of an air gap with the sound blankets. I mean, again, if you're in a temporary load-in, which is the only time I put everybody in the same room. So if you're doing it permanently, you should really think about, again, doesn't have to be even on the same floor. Like people talk to us about, like, do you have to have the control room on the same floor? I'm like, not really. You want to have it somewhere where you can get to it relatively easily, but you can really run, the control room doesn't need to be anywhere near the studio. If I'll always pick a control room that is I have plenty of space. I have AC, I have power. I'd rather have all of those things than to be in the hallway outside of some space that I'm working in, kind of crammed with everyone walking behind me and making noise. You were gonna say something, Mickey? I'll move on.
And yeah, especially when you have an A2 and comms, you don't have to be on the same floor or even in the same building.
Yeah. Next question.
Patrick Shonas, Little Rock, Arkansas says, not sure who's switching today, but please keep in mind the attendees in YouTube when hanging out in the gallery view while folks are showing off their studio space. We really didn't get to see Leland or Alex's spaces.
We were moving so fast. Go ahead, Mickey.
I looked at that earlier, and then for some reason it didn't follow my view. And then when I looked into the settings here in the upper right corner of Zoom, and it switched to not follow host view. It switched to stick on gallery view, and I'm not sure.
We'll do this one's more of a studio discussion, but we'll do a show your own space second hour. That's what we really need. Is cool. Show your space. That gives us a moment to clean up a little bit. So we'll give you a little warning so that we can do it. I think maybe even next week we'll do one, which is like a show. Next week or the week after we'll do show your space, and everyone figures out how to show off what theirs looks like. Next question.
Alex Fuller D in London, England. Alex, you suggest using Blackmagic cameras for super 35mm studio work. For recording, do you stick to Blackmagic RAW or ProRes?
I almost always shoot RAW. No, just because it just gives me the most amount of flexibility later. So if I'm going to record, I almost always shoot RAW. If there's a couple reasons that I don't, it's too long for my storage. I just know that it's a 2-hour event. Storing that all in 6K RAW, not trivial. So I may choose to, if I feel like I'm going to have to go below 8:1 on a Blackmagic camera, then I'll just switch over to ProRes. And so because there's more compression that's available, but I don't know what I get out of that. So then I move to ProRes. But and once you go to ProRes, for me, unless I'm doing effects work, I'm doing HQ. Like if I'm switching down from RAW, I'm not going to go to 444, 444 XQ. The HQ gives me 10-bit, which is, so I can at least have what I need for most of what I do. And I've already decided, because I'm going to ProRes HQ, that I don't need as much as I had with RAW. So go ahead, Bill.
I'll choose when I'm doing the site survey. If I have video problems, like if I've got backlit windows behind the executive, always RAW, because you want that extra latitude. If I come into a set location and I say, that's really pretty, I like it the way it is, I'll shoot ProRes just because ProRes, so I don't have to mess with it in the pipeline and grade everything that closely.
Go ahead, Mickey.
I think a lot of times you also have to take into account budgets, because we shot a bunch of documentaries and 2019, 2 years ago, we did a dance competition show, and they had a couple of mirrors there, and because we were rolling for a long period of time, we had to go down to ProRes for that. So budgets had to be taken into account as well, both for storage and also processing horsepower needed.
Next question.
Excuse me, I was trying to look up key clamp because that's what it's about. I've used key clamp for stage work. Has anybody used that for temporary studio setups? Is that like a Cardellini or a Mayfair?
No, it's more like Speed Rail or Hollander. Oh. Looks like a less expensive version of a lot of the Hollander stuff. So Hollander makes the Speed Rail fittings that most of us use. I didn't know about key clamp until right now. So I'm actually interested from a cost perspective, because the thing that gets expensive is not the speed rail itself, it's all the fittings. Like you can spend a little bit of money on the speed rail and then a lot of money on all the fittings. And key clamp looks like a more cost-effective solution. So this is what speed rail becomes kind of a, and I kind of like some of the things that they're doing with the hinges and so on and so forth. I mean, it's definitely worth checking out. I've never used them. Generally what I've done in the past is bought everything that's, most of us that are in the industry doing this are using Hollander, you know, connectors. It's kind of the industry standard, but it doesn't have to be. I don't know enough about it. I mean, this is just raw material. It'll just be like, how well does it fit kind of stuff. Go ahead, Roscoe.
Are you using Schedule 40? Are you that heavy? Pipe?
The pipe I'm using is, I mean, we usually measure it in inches. So it's, you know, I think it's 1.5 inch.
No, yeah, Schedule 40 is just how thick it is, how much weight it can hold. It all comes rated. But
I have to admit, when we get 1.5 inch speed rail, I don't know what I could hang on it that would break it. I'm sure, like I don't, like when we order it, I don't know what their schedule is. I don't know how thick it is. I just know that I could, you know, I can hang from it definitely.
Exactly.
And
Okay.
You know, like, yeah. So we can it's definitely got an enormous amount of strength. And what we've done, what I did in my last studio, I won't do it here because my wife won't want me to do it this way. But what we did last time is I put it in the corners. So I dropped pins into the corners of each of the whole room. Then I built the grid, and then you can get these, Hollander makes these ones that you put a little bit of speed rail on a pad and you can push it against the wall. And so you just push you basically, that way you're not installing anything in your room. You're running poles that go straight up, and then you push it, you're pushing tension on both sides of the room, on, you know, one on each wall, and it pushes it, and it gets very, very rigid. Without doing any permanent damage to what you're doing. You can't move it up and down. So the one that I'm doing now, or the one I'm looking at doing in my house, because I have kind of a high ceiling, is hanging one with a winch or some kind of hand winch that I can move the whole thing down, work on it, and push it back up again. So that's kind of where I'm going with that. Next question.
Eddie Martinez of Sacramento, who has our last question. Which Wacom tablet is Alex using? A quick look. I see a price of $3,500.
It is a, I believe it, I don't know if it's branded as the Cintiq. There is a, it's not, I'm not using there is a less expensive one, the Wacom one. So the Wacom one is what I've started to use. It's a high definition creative pen display designed for creative hobbyists and visual thinkers. But it's a great Wacom tablet. You know, for $450, like, it's unbelievable for $450 what you can do with it. So the routing, I have this is the Cintiq. This is the 16 inch. This is 16 inch Cintiq, and this costs $1,200. The $450 version does almost what this does. The only thing that's missing with this is that the routing is much more difficult with this one. The in and outs, the HDMIs and everything else are actually much easier on the new Wacom one. And this one has buttons, and the Wacom one doesn't. A little bit of an issue. But I think that I'm working around it with a Stream Deck, but, you know, I have it on the pen to blank things out and control it. And I had a bunch of controls on those buttons for these Wacoms that I had built. So it's not perfect, but not bad. Anyway, go ahead, Bill.
Oh, just concerned, yeah, interested in whether you've played around any with the Apple Pencil on an iPad or an iPad Pro to do some of that kind of work.
So I use it a lot. And what I do when I do that is I do an iPad with Keynote. And what I do is I make 40 Keynote white slides, and then I just draw on them as I need. And I just swipe and just draw, and then swipe and then draw. So I can clear very quickly by just moving forward. And so I use Keynote with that, and that works really good, or really well. It works well. The challenge, really, the reason I use the Wacom tablets is I need video in. So I want to draw over top of the video. So that's the reason that I can't, the number one reason I use the Wacom, and not that I have not developed software that will do that effectively yet. So I have developed software that does it effectively with the Wacom tablets. Go ahead, Chris.
We recently had a client who wanted us to animate a bunch of signatures, and, you know, you could do that in After Effects. It's tedious. And I was just like, no, we're not going to do that. And so we got the iPad Pro and the pencil and everything. He said, here, just sign your name. And we used one of the capture apps and just, here, sign it a couple times. Okay, that'll do. So much easier to just key that than animate the strokes.
We did it with Photoshop. We put some Photoshop actions together, and we did it for a book signing. It was unbelievable. So what would happen is that the person would talk, the author, it was a pretty well-known author, I won't get into who, but a really well-known author. It was 400 people in the room, but they were talking to people over Hangouts. and they're sitting there talking to them, and they go, "Oh, so who do I sign this to?" And like, to Judy, you know, from this really, you know, and then we hit a button in the back, and it would save that layer and just create a new layer, right? And so then she'd go, "Okay, who's next?" And then boom, and so the cover of her book. And it was like, and so we just were able to just clean through all these folks where she's talking to them online remotely, signing their book cover, you know, and then we sent them really great JPEGs. Actually, we printed them. So we sent them to a really nice printer, and it printed out. It was actually probably higher quality than the actual book. But they were JPEGs when we had them, but then we just pushed them all out as JPEGs, sent them to a service. They got it. It showed up to them framed. Super happy. Like it was like, you know, like, and you know, like they were like, everybody thought that was magical. Yeah. So the second time we did it, we had someone accidentally unplug the computer before we had saved. So we had to put a thing in the save. So the first time it was great. Second time was, we had to have the author do it again. Like, you know, like, you know, and she wasn't happy about that, but the first time worked really, really well. So it was just magical, as I said. And so then we just, nowadays we could probably have it printed and sent to you, you know, while you're still signing them.
The fact that it got delivered and printed and you didn't have to touch all of that, that's the part that's magical.
Literally uploaded it to a service, put an email, put a address in for each person, and it shows up in the frame, printed, everything all done, like nothing. You know, it was, you know, and it was like, I don't know, it probably cost us, you know, $40 a person or something like that to do that. So it wasn't like inexpensive, but of course, what it is that, you know, it's a big signing, you know, and you don't have to do it that. You don't have to. A lot of people, you could just send them the JPEG, you know, for free, you know, or give them the option to have it framed and sent. We had it because it was you know, it was a PR thing. They were willing to pay per person to knock it out. Anyway, another whole business model that I don't have time to do. Like, but I can tell you that's a big business model. Book signing, like virtual book signings, big business. Anyway. Thank you all for everyone who stuck out. We went a little heavy, but it was a fun conversation. I wasn't sure if we'd have enough to talk about, but we did. As always, we always have enough to talk about. We always think, I'm always like,
crowd,
is this going to work? So then it always does. So anyway, thank you all. Thanks to all the panelists and to everyone who is in the attendees asking great questions. So we pulled it off once again, 300 sometimes. We're getting close now. I don't pay attention to numbers or times or dates very well, but I am noticing that we are starting to close in on a year. Like, you know, it's starting to.
March 25th, right?
I know. Yeah, we're like 6 weeks away now from doing this every day for a year. It's kind of amazing. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and punch to the post show. Thanks, everybody. See you.